Cameron solved the impossible equation on the board. Then a hidden email flashed on his screen. You weren't supposed to solve that. The class clapped. The professor smiled, but only for a second. By the time Cameron sat down, security was already walking in. And in 60 seconds, his life would no longer belong to him. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Morning light poured through the high windows of the old mathematics hall, catching the dust in slow, golden spirals. The place had been built a century earlier, all wood panels and echoing ceilings that made every voice sound larger than it was. On this particular Tuesday, it felt like the walls themselves were waiting to see what would happen. Professor Nathaniel Rourke stood at the front of the lecture theater. His gray suit was pressed to military precision, and his reputation for toughness was almost legendary among first-year students. He didn't raise his voice often, but when he did, it had a way of erasing every whisper in the room. He turned from the chalkboard where a chain of symbols stretched from corner to corner, elegant, terrifying, and utterly unfamiliar. 20 minutes, he said, tapping the chalk against the board. Solve this, and I'll give you $1,000. A low murmur rippled through the room. The 100+ students looked from the equation to one another, half laughing, half panicked. The board was filled with variables that seemed to drift into infinity. Integrals, differential terms, a faint whisper of chaos theory, disguised in pure algebra. Rourke leaned back against the desk, folding his arms. No calculators, no collaboration, just insight, the kind that can't be memorized. He waited, scanning the rows like a hunter scanning a clearing. In the fourth row sat Cameron Ellis, a freshman on scholarship, the sort who still carried last semester's textbook because he couldn't afford the new edition. He loved math, not because of the numbers, but because of the quiet logic behind them. The way everything eventually fit if you were patient enough to see it. Yet patience was something college life hadn't been kind about. Cameron could feel his pulse in his fingertips. He recognized fragments of the equation. It wasn't impossible, just disguised. Somewhere inside that mess was a simple idea, hidden by layers of theatrics. Rourke's challenge was less about mathematics than nerve. Every other student knew it. The professor was famous for exposing bluffers. Anyone? Rourke asked, looking at the clock. 19 minutes now. No one moved. Not a single notebook opened. The air felt heavy with self-protection. Cameron's pencil rolled off his desk, clattering on the floor. The sound turned heads. He bent to pick it up, but when he sat back up, the equation stared down at him again, taunting. Alive. He inhaled through his nose. You know this, he told himself under his breath. You just have to see it differently. 2 rows over, a group of students whispered about odds and impossible tests. Someone joked that the $1,000 wasn't worth public embarrassment. Laughter followed, nervous, defensive. Cameron adjusted in his seat. His hand twitched. Then almost before he realized it, he raised it. A collective shift moved through the lecture hall. Heads turned. The sound of chairs squeaking echoed. Rourke's eyebrows arched. Surprise. Yes? The professor said evenly. Cameron cleared his throat. May I try, sir? You may, Rourke replied, though the small smile that tugged at his mouth looked more like curiosity than approval. Come forward. Cameron gathered his notebook, walked down the steps that felt steeper than usual, and took the chalk that Rourke held out. It was still warm from the professor's hand. He faced the equation. The symbols seemed enormous now, stretching wider with every heartbeat. The room felt like a theater, and he, the reluctant performer, he wrote carefully, translating the equation's complexity into smaller pieces. He spoke quietly, as he worked not to the class, but to the logic itself. If we isolate the variable here, this term cancels, then the boundary condition. Whispers ran through the seats. Some students nodded. Others exchanged doubtful looks. Cameron's handwriting trailed into an elegant curve of numbers. 10 minutes left. Rourke stepped closer, his shoes clicking against the tile. You're assuming continuity, where it may not exist, he said. Yes, sir, Cameron answered. But I believe the function behaves predictably near zero. Rourke tilted his head. You believe, or you've proven. I'm proving now. The chalk squeaked as Cameron drew another line, correcting himself mid-stroke, erasing, rewriting. He didn't rush. His calm made the room tense. The professor watched, arms still folded. Around them the silence deepened, until every scratch of chalk felt like a drumbeat. 5 minutes. Cameron stepped back, eyes narrowing. Wait, he murmured. then crossed out 3 entire lines. Gasps fluttered through the room. "Problem?" Rourke asked. "No," Cameron said softly. "Just realizing something." He moved faster now, chalk dust flying like snow. The board became a tapestry of symbols reorganized into a new pattern. One that suddenly made sense. He circled the final expression and placed the chalk down carefully on the ledge. The equation was solved. Or at least he thought it was. The hall remained silent. No one breathed. Cameron turned to the professor. "That's the result," he said, voice steady but low. Rourke approached, reading the work without a word. His eyes moved across the board once, then again slower. He reached up, traced one symbol with his finger, and stopped. Then he smiled, a small, unreadable smile. "Interesting," he said. The class exhaled collectively, the way people do after holding their breath for too long. "Care to explain your conclusion?" Rourke asked. His tone was still polite, but there was an edge under it now. A razor wrapped in velvet. Cameron stepped forward. "The structure of your problem implied a discontinuity. But if we treat the system as approaching an asymptote rather than a collapse, it simplifies. The apparent paradox cancels itself. You're suggesting the impossibility is self-constructed." "Yes, sir." Rourke tapped the chalk against the board again. "And you're certain?" Cameron hesitated, then nodded. "Certain enough to risk being wrong." A few students laughed quietly, the tension breaking for a heartbeat. Rourke didn't laugh. He turned to the class. "Certainty is the privilege of experience," he said, "but courage is the privilege of youth." He faced Cameron again. "You have both, and one of them is about to be tested." He began rewriting Cameron's solution step by step, challenging each simplification. Cameron answered calmly, defending his reasoning point by point. What began as a test turned into an impromptu debate, elegant and relentless. 3 minutes left. Cameron's confidence grew, as he saw Rourke pause, just once, briefly, when the logic held. A flicker of respect appeared in the professor's eyes, quickly hid. The class watched like spectators at a match they hadn't expected to care about. Every correction, every small triumph drew them closer to the edge of their seats. Finally, Rourke set the chalk down and faced the room. "Class dismissed," he said abruptly. A wave of confusion spread. The students began packing, whispering, unsure whether Cameron had succeeded or failed. Cameron stood frozen at the front, the board behind him still filled with his work. "Professor?" he asked. Rourke looked at him for a long moment. "I'll review it in detail," he said. "If your logic holds, you'll have earned more than money. You'll have earned my attention." He turned and left the room, the sound of his shoes fading down the corridor. Cameron remained alone amid the shuffle of departing students. Some offered quick nods of acknowledgement. Others avoided eye contact, already retreating into their own lives. He glanced at the board again. His heart still raced, but a different kind of fear began to bloom. The fear that perhaps he'd misunderstood the professor's expression. Was it approval, or was it amusement? He gathered his notebook slowly, still hearing that faint, knowing smile in Rourke's voice. The challenge wasn't over. Maybe it had just begun. At the back of the hall, someone lingered, a teaching assistant perhaps scribbling something in a notebook while watching him. Cameron couldn't tell whether it was admiration or curiosity. He pushed the thought aside and left the lecture hall, the corridor cold after the heat of attention. Students passed by in clusters, still talking about the $1,000 problem. Some said it was unsolved. Others swore he'd cracked it. By the time Cameron stepped out into the October air, the sun was already lowering behind the bell tower, and the question of whether he'd succeeded seemed less important than the realization that for the first time since arriving at the university, people had actually noticed him. He didn't know yet whether that would be a blessing or a burden. As he walked across the courtyard, his phone buzzed. A new email notification appeared. "Follow-up regarding your performance today." No sender's name, just those words. Cameron stopped in his tracks, staring at the screen. The wind caught his jacket. He felt the weight of the entire day collapse into one thought. Had the professor already decided what came next? In the quiet glow of the setting sun, Cameron's screen refreshed, revealing a single unread message at the top, sent from an address he didn't recognize. Subject line: "You shouldn't have solved it." The next morning, the university's campus looked washed clean by a night of rain. Water still glistened on the flagstones, as students crossed the courtyard in hurried streams, chasing coffee and deadlines. Inside the mathematics building, the air smelled faintly of chalk and wet coats. Cameron Ellis arrived 10 minutes early for class, as he always did. Sleep had been an elusive stranger. His mind kept looping back to the message he'd received the night before. Those 6 strange words, "You shouldn't have solved it." He'd read it again and again until dawn blurred the edges of his thoughts. No sender, no signature, just a simple statement that felt more like a warning than feedback. He'd almost convinced himself it was a prank from some overexcited student, maybe a classmate who thought the $1,000 equation was still part of the game. But something about it had stayed with him. The tone, the certainty. Now, as he sat in the 4th row again, he opened his laptop, half expecting a follow-up message. There was nothing. Around him, the lecture hall filled slowly. Conversations rose and fell like distant waves. Complaints about midterms, laughter about dorm life, the usual rhythm of college days. But beneath the chatter was an undertone he couldn't ignore. Every so often, a glance lingered too long in his direction. A whisper cut off abruptly when he turned his head. He tried to steady his breathing. "It's fine," he told himself. "People talk. They always talk after something unusual." At exactly 9 o'clock, Professor Rourke entered the room. The shift in atmosphere was instant. Voices died, screens snapped shut, posture straightened. He placed his leather briefcase on the desk, removed a piece of chalk from the pocket of his suit, and began writing without a word. The board filled quickly with symbols again, new ones this time, a continuation of yesterday's problem. His handwriting was precise, severe, as if he were cutting each symbol from stone. When he finished, he turned to face the class. "Yesterday's exercise," he said, "was meant to test your intuition. Today we test endurance." A few nervous laughs fluttered around the room. Rourke's eyes drifted toward Cameron. Just for a second, enough to be noticed, not enough to be called deliberate. Then he spoke to everyone. "The same reward stands. Solve it correctly, before the hour ends, and the $1,000 is yours." A student near the back muttered, "Round 2. Someone else whispered, "He's serious this time." Cameron's pulse quickened. He hadn't planned on drawing attention again. In fact, he'd promised himself he'd stay invisible today. Take notes quietly, blend back into the crowd. But the new equation on the board, it wasn't random. He recognized its structure. It began exactly where yesterday's left off. It felt personal. "Begin," Rourke said, and the room erupted into the sound of pens scratching, pages flipping, laptops opening despite the rules. Cameron stared at the board. He could feel the logic unfolding already, the pattern revealing itself like a melody only he could hear. But he hesitated. He didn't want to seem like he was showing off, didn't want the same spotlight again. Minutes passed. The room hummed with the anxious energy of unsolved problems. Someone groaned. Another whispered, "This one's worse than yesterday's." Cameron bit his lip. It's just math, he thought. It's supposed to be neutral, clean. He took out his pencil, started scribbling quietly on the margin of his notebook, testing an idea. The numbers began to align. His instincts were right. The solution was hiding inside the pattern. Then came that inevitable whisper behind him. "He's doing it again." He froze. His pencil hovered above the paper. Slowly, he glanced over his shoulder. 2 students were watching him. Not maliciously, but with a kind of amused disbelief. One gave a low whistle. "Go on, genius," the other said under his breath, just loud enough to carry. Cameron turned back around. His ears burned. He looked at the board again, at the problem that seemed to taunt him now. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about proving to himself, if to no one else, that he hadn't just been lucky yesterday. He lifted his hand. The movement was automatic, but the reaction was immediate. Dozens of eyes found him. The air shifted again. That familiar pause that felt like being on stage without rehearsal. Professor Rourke stopped mid-stride. "Yes, Mr. Ellis. I think I can show a method," Cameron said carefully. Rourke placed the chalk down for a moment. "A method, not an answer? A method that leads there." "Then by all means," Rourke replied, gesturing toward the board. Cameron stood, his chair scraping softly against the floor. He walked down the aisle, aware of every heartbeat, every stare following him. When he reached the front, Rourke handed him the chalk without comment. He began writing. His handwriting was steadier today, his confidence clearer. "This series," he said, "depends on the behavior of its lower boundary. Yesterday's problem concealed a discontinuity. Today it conceals symmetry." Rourke crossed his arms. "Go on." Cameron continued, explaining each transformation in plain words, making sure the class could follow. A few students leaned forward, captivated despite themselves. Others typed notes. For a moment, the room existed only in rhythm. Chalk against board, breath against silence. Rourke circled one of Cameron's steps. "You're assuming convergence where divergence is likely," he pointed out. "Yes, sir," Cameron said. "But if we change the point of observation, treat the system from infinity instead of zero, it converges naturally." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "From infinity? It's like a mirror. The same pattern, reversed." A long pause. Then Rourke stepped back, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Interesting analogy." Cameron's pulse slowed a little. He felt the room leaning in again, not laughing this time, just watching. The tension had transformed from skepticism to genuine curiosity. He wrote the final expression, underlined it twice, and stepped aside. "That's as far as I can take it without substituting constants." Rourke approached the board, examining the symbols. The silence stretched long enough for the ticking of the clock to sound deafening. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "Class, I'd like you to check Mr. Ellis's reasoning. Line by line." A murmur of surprise moved through the rows. Students began comparing notes, murmuring equations to one another. Cameron stood near the front, hands clasped behind his back, trying not to fidget. After several minutes, a voice from the second row said, "It works. The symmetry holds." Another student added, "The convergence check passes too." Rourke's eyes flicked toward Cameron. "It appears your mirror behaved as predicted," he said quietly. Relief flooded through Cameron, but he kept his composure. "Thank you, sir." The professor nodded once. "You may sit." As Cameron walked back to his seat, small nods followed him. A few smiles, but not all the looks were kind. Somewhere behind him, someone whispered, "Teacher's pet." Another muttered, "He rehearsed it." He tried to ignore it, but the words sank deeper than he wanted to admit. He sat down, closed his notebook, and stared straight ahead. Rourke cleared his throat. "For the record," he said to the class, "today's equation was not designed to have a closed-form solution. Mr. Ellis discovered one." A hush fell. Then the professor added, "That, ladies and gentlemen, is the purpose of this course, not memorization, but perception." Applause broke out, hesitant but real. Cameron looked up, startled. He hadn't expected it. The professor let it go on for a few seconds, then raised a hand. "Enough. We'll discuss the implications next week. For now, you are dismissed." Chairs scraped again. Conversations resumed. The normal rhythm of the day began to reassert itself. Cameron packed his things slowly, waiting for the crowd to thin. When he finally stepped into the hallway, the world felt oddly quiet. He checked his phone out of habit. No new messages. He should have felt relieved, but the emptiness of his inbox only deepened the unease that had followed him since yesterday. As he walked toward the exit, a soft voice behind him said, "Hey, Cameron, right?" He turned. It was a girl from the back row, dark-haired, wearing an oversized hoodie and carrying a stack of notebooks. She smiled, a little awkwardly. "That was really impressive." "Thanks," he said, surprised. "I mean it. You saw something the rest of us didn't." He shrugged, trying to play it down. "Just luck." "No," she said. "Insight." Before he could reply, another voice cut in. Deeper, familiar. "Ellis." Professor Rourke stood a few feet away, holding a small folder. His tone was neutral, but his expression unreadable. "A word if you have a moment." Cameron nodded, turning back to the girl. "I'll see you around." She smiled. "Yeah, see." He followed Rourke down the hallway, into the professor's office. The door closed softly behind them. Books lined every wall, the air thick with the scent of paper and old wood polish. Rourke placed the folder on the desk. "You've shown considerable promise," he began. "But I need to ask, did you have prior exposure to this material? Perhaps from another institution?" Cameron blinked. "No, sir. Just independent study." Rourke studied him for a long moment, then said, "Independent study can be dangerous. You may start seeing patterns where none exist." "I'm sure of what I saw," Cameron said quietly. The professor leaned forward, lowering his voice. "And what if what you saw wasn't meant to be seen?" Cameron frowned. "I don't understand." Rourke tapped the folder once with his finger. "Then perhaps you will when you read this." He slid the folder across the desk. On the cover was a single phrase typed in bold, "Confidential, academic inquiry, unfortunate solution path." Cameron opened the folder slowly. Inside was a printed email, dated the night before, sent from an untraceable address. The same sentence stared back at him in black ink. You shouldn't have solved it. Cameron stared at the words printed inside the folder. Confidential academic inquiry. Onto solution path. The document was short, barely 2 pages, but every line seemed to tighten the air in the professor's office. Across from him, Rourke leaned back in his chair, eyes calm but watchful. Cameron skimmed the first paragraph. It outlined a review of his recent work, mentioning methodological irregularities and unsanctioned inference models. The language was polite, almost sterile, but the implication was clear. Someone had questioned the validity of his solution. He looked up. I don't understand. Unauthorized by whom? By no one in particular, Rourke said. It's a procedural formality. When an unexpected result appears in this department, it goes through a standard verification process, especially when it challenges an established theorem. But it was a classroom exercise, Cameron said. I didn't publish anything. Rourke's voice softened, almost kind. Sometimes discovery arrives where it isn't expected. And institutions, well, they like their discoveries to come with proper timing and proper supervision. Cameron folded the paper. So I did something wrong by finding an answer? Rourke steepled his fingers. Not wrong. Just unconventional. He paused. I'm giving you this as a courtesy. Normally, such reviews are handled without the student's knowledge. Cameron couldn't decide whether that was meant as protection or control. He wanted to ask more, but Rourke's expression closed like a door. I advise you to keep working quietly, the professor said. Focus on your coursework. Let the system do its part. Cameron nodded slowly, though every instinct screamed at him that something was off. Understood. As he left the office, the corridor felt colder than before. His reflection wavered faintly in the glass doors, at the end of the hall, for the first time since arriving at the university. He didn't feel like a participant in something larger. He felt like a variable that had slipped out of place. He spent the afternoon in the library, the rain starting again outside. The sound of it on the roof was steady, hypnotic. He tried to lose himself in ordinary work, proofs, problem sets, quiet logic, but his focus kept circling back to the folder now buried in his bag. Every time he reread the phrase unauthorized solution, he thought of one word, bias. Not bias in the social sense. Bias in systems, in logic itself. The tendency of equations, like people, to prefer patterns that already exist. He wondered if the university had its own kind of equation, a framework that rewarded predictability and punished deviation. Maybe Rourke wasn't protecting him. Maybe the professor was protecting the system. The rain deepened into a storm. At 6, the lights flickered. A group of students at the next table gathered their things and left. Cameron stayed, staring at a blank page in his notebook. Then, without fully realizing why, he began to write again, not numbers this time, but ideas. He wrote, bias exists wherever expectation overrides observation. Then, the system defends itself not by rejection, but by confusion. The thought hit him hard. He'd seen it happen before, in smaller ways, how committees rejected new models, how journals dismissed results that didn't fit established frameworks. The equation of bias wasn't made of numbers. It was made of comfort. Footsteps approached. He looked up to see the girl from class, the one who'd spoken to him yesterday. She held 2 cups of coffee. You've been here all day, she said. Figured you might need this. He smiled despite himself. Thanks, Lena, she said, setting the cup down. You looked like you were trying to solve the universe. Just trying to make sense of it, Cameron said. She sat across from him. So, what's the deal with the professor? Everyone's talking. You actually broke one of his problems? I guess so, he said, lowering his voice. But apparently that's a problem of its own. What do you mean? He hesitated, then pulled the folder from his bag and slid it toward her. They're reviewing my work, calling it unauthorized. Lena frowned as she read. That's ridiculous. You did it in class. How could it be unauthorized? That's what I asked. Sounds like someone doesn't like being surprised, she said quietly. Professors here guard their reputations like patents. Cameron leaned back, watching the rain blur the world outside. I think it's bigger than that, he said something about discovery needing timing and supervision, like there's a right way to be right. Lena studied him. You're thinking this is political. I'm thinking it's structural. She smiled faintly. You really can't stop solving, can you? Cameron laughed under his breath. It's how I make sense of things. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of quiet that felt almost safe. Then her phone buzzed. She checked the screen and her face changed slightly.
What is it?
He asked. She showed him. It was a post on the student network, anonymous, spreading fast. The headline read, "Scholarship student accused of academic misconduct after lucky guess." His chest went hollow. That's not. I know, she said, but it's already out there. Cameron grabbed his bag, heart racing. I need to talk to Rourke. Lena caught his arm. Wait, going in angry won't help. I'm not angry, he said, though his voice betrayed him. I'm confused. He walked quickly through the empty corridors until he reached the professor's office again. The door was closed. Light seeped from under it. He knocked once. No answer. He tried again. Harder. The door opened slowly. Not Rourke, but the department assistant, a quiet man in his 40s. He's in a meeting, the assistant said. Can I help you? Cameron shook his head. No, it's fine. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something on the desk inside. Another folder identical to his own, labeled in the same way, authorized solution path, internal review. He froze. Are those all reviews? The assistant hesitated. You shouldn't be in here, Mr. Ellis. How many students have these? That information isn't public, the man replied, closing the door firmly. Cameron stood in the hallway, pulse pounding. It wasn't just him. The system did have an equation, one designed to keep innovation contained. He went back to the library, spread the folder open beside his notes, and began writing furiously. Equations and words tangled together, logic, theory, metaphor. He didn't realize Lena had followed until she spoke softly behind him. You're documenting this? I'm modeling it, he said. The process of suppression. The pattern repeats. Student proposes new solution. Institution neutralizes it through procedure. You're turning bureaucracy into math, into proof, he said. If they see the pattern, they can't deny it. She watched as he filled the page, his handwriting quick and sure. For every abstract concept, he found a symbol. For every obstacle, a formula. It wasn't revenge. It was understanding. Hours passed. When he finally stopped, the library was nearly empty. Lena rested her chin on her hand, watching him. You know this could get you into real trouble, right? I know, Cameron said. But if truth threatens the system, maybe it's the system that's unstable. He looked down at the page he'd filled. It wasn't perfect, but it was the beginning of something. He called it the equation of bias. Lena leaned closer. What does it mean? He smiled faintly. It means the closer you get to the truth, the stronger the resistance becomes. She nodded slowly. So what happens when you reach the center? He met her eyes. Then something breaks. The lights flickered again. Cameron gathered his papers. I should go, he said. If the review escalates, I'll need all this documented. Lena stood too. You're not alone in this, you know. He looked at her, surprised. You'd help me? Someone should. They left the library together. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air was thick, humming with electricity. Cameron glanced once more at the folder under his arm. The official stamp of control on the cover, his handwritten notes inside defying it. He couldn't shake the feeling that the night was holding its breath. As he reached his dorm, Cameron found an envelope slipped under his door, unmarked, thin and damp from the rain. Inside was a single page, printed with the same phrase he'd seen before. You shouldn't have solved it. But this time, beneath the words there was a small handwritten addition. It wasn't meant to be solved at all. Rain still streaked down the dorm windows when Cameron opened the anonymous envelope again, rereading the same haunting line. It wasn't meant to be solved at all. He could still feel the paper's faint dampness between his fingers, the way the letters blurred slightly at the edges. Whoever sent it hadn't typed this on a whim. It felt deliberate, almost theatrical. He set it on his desk, next to his half-finished notes on the equation of bias. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd turned a problem about logic into one about secrecy. His roommate Dylan was asleep, earbuds in, oblivious to the world. The soft pulse of music bled faintly through the quiet. Cameron opened his laptop. The student network was buzzing again. Posts, comments, half-truths. His name threaded through conversations like static. Suspicious timing. One comment read, maybe the prof gave him the answer. He closed the screen, pulse rising. It wasn't just the rumor that hurt, it was how quickly people believed it. He leaned back, exhaling, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't meant to be solved, he murmured. Then why assign it? By morning the sky had cleared but the air felt heavy, like the calm before a deeper storm. When he arrived at class, the hall was louder than usual. A small crowd had gathered near the front, buzzing with the energy of fresh gossip. Someone had written on the whiteboard, "Ellis effect, when you solve something you shouldn't." The joke spread fast. Cameron froze, then forced himself to take his seat. He tried to keep his face neutral, but his chest tightened. Around him, laughter rose and fell, not cruel, just careless, the way laughter often is when people forget it has direction. Then the door opened. Professor Rourke entered, the room quieting instantly. His usual composure seemed sharper today, more precise. He erased the board with deliberate strokes until the mocking equation disappeared in white smears. Without a word, he began a new problem. The chalk moved quickly. This one looked familiar, too familiar. Cameron's stomach dropped. It was his own work. The very proof he'd submitted during the challenge, written now in Rourke's elegant script. The professor turned to the class. "Yesterday's demonstration," he said, "was an intriguing deviation from standard reasoning. But upon review, certain steps warrant discussion." Cameron's throat went dry. Rourke continued, "Mr. Ellis proposed a symmetry transformation to address divergence. A creative approach. However, it risks oversimplifying the model. Let's dissect why." He began marking Cameron's equations with red chalk circles, arrows, crosses. Every stroke felt like an incision. Cameron raised his hand. "Sir, may I explain that step?" Rourke nodded curtly. "Go ahead." Cameron stood. The room's attention landed on him like a spotlight. He walked to the front, took a piece of chalk, and rewrote the disputed line beside the professor's. "The simplification works," he said, "because symmetry isn't applied to the entire function, only the converging subset." Rourke gave a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, a conditional symmetry. Convenient." "It's not convenience, it's structure," Cameron said, forcing calm. "The balance holds, if the limits behave," Rourke interrupted, voice still smooth. "And what if they don't?" "They do," Cameron replied. "Under continuity constraints, they always do." The professor took a step closer. "Always? That's a strong word in mathematics." Cameron could feel the pulse behind his temples. Strong but accurate. The room tensed, caught between admiration and discomfort. It wasn't a shouting match. It was something subtler. A battle for intellectual space. Rourke turned back to the board, underlining Cameron's equation with a single decisive line. "Then let us see." He handed the chalk back. "Demonstrate." Cameron nodded, heart pounding. He began writing, rebuilding the proof from the ground up, his mind running faster than his hands. The chalk squeaked, cracked, continued. His reasoning held, line after line falling neatly into place. Rourke circled one step. "You're assuming linearity here," he said. "It's demonstrable," Cameron replied. "Prove it." Cameron did. Another correction. Another defense. The rhythm became relentless statement. Challenge, counter-argument. The board filled again, a dense forest of logic. Cameron's fingers were white with chalk dust, his jaw tight with concentration. Then halfway through a line, the professor's voice broke the silence. "You have an answer for everything, Mr. Ellis. Perhaps that's the problem." The class laughed, soft, uncertain, but it spread. Cameron paused, the sound landing heavier than it should have. He wasn't angry, exactly. It was something quieter, deeper, a hollow ache behind his ribs. He turned back to the board. "I'm not trying to have an answer for everything," he said. "I'm trying to understand." The laughter died. For a moment, even Rourke looked caught off guard. Then he recovered, his tone almost gentle. "Understanding is dangerous when it outruns humility." Cameron stared at the chalk in his hand. "Maybe. But ignorance is worse when it hides behind tradition." The silence that followed was absolute. Rourke's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room did. "Finish your proof," he said quietly. Cameron finished it. Every line aligned perfectly. When he placed the chalk down, his breathing came shallow and fast. Rourke studied the result, the faint trace of unease, crossing his face just enough for Cameron to see it before it vanished. Then, unexpectedly, the professor laughed. It wasn't cruel or loud, but it echoed oddly through the hall. "Well," he said finally, "it appears the theorem collapses to consistency." Remarkable. The class shifted, unsure whether to laugh with him or stay silent. A few chuckles rippled, uncertain. To Cameron, The laughter felt heavier than any criticism. It wasn't mockery. It was dismissal. Rourke tapped the board. "You've forced an impossible function into balance. That takes nerve. But as I said before, sometimes discovery needs supervision." He turned to the class. "Consider this a lesson in boundaries." Something in Cameron snapped quietly, not in anger but in resolve. He picked up his notebook, flipping to the page marked E. "Boundaries," he murmured, "are just untested edges." Rourke looked at him. "What was that?" "Nothing, sir," Cameron said. Rourke smiled faintly. "Good. I'd hate to see ambition turn into defiance." He dismissed the class. Students began packing, the shuffle of movement filling the void. Cameron stood frozen, still facing the board. His equation, his work was there, half erased by red chalk. Lena lingered by the doorway. She mouthed, "You were right," but didn't dare speak aloud. Cameron gave a tiny nod. As the room emptied, Rourke remained at his desk, gathering papers. "A word, Mr. Ellis," he said without looking up. Cameron approached slowly. "You're talented," the professor said. "Brilliant, even. But brilliance without patience burns out quickly. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Rourke looked up then, eyes steady. "Be careful which doors you open. Some aren't meant for students to walk through." Cameron frowned. Was that another warning? "An observation," Rourke said. He dismissed him with a nod. Outside, the corridor felt colder than before. Lena waited by the stairwell. "That was brutal," she said. "But you handled it." He gave a tired smile. "Did I?" He laughed, she said. "That means you got under his skin." Cameron hesitated. "Or maybe I proved something he didn't want proven." They walked together down the hall. The laughter from earlier still echoed faintly in his memory. Too sharp, too deliberate. As they reached the exit, Lena pulled out her phone. "You should see this," she said. On her screen was a video, grainy, recorded from the back of the classroom. It showed Cameron and Rourke, at the board, the debate unfolding exactly as it had. Every word audible. "Someone recorded the whole thing," Lena whispered. "It's already spreading." Cameron's pulse spiked. "Who posted it?" "No idea. It just says anonymous upload." He stared at the video thumbnail, his own figure frozen mid-gesture, the board full of equations behind him. The caption read, "When a student solves the teacher." The post already had hundreds of views. Comments were flooding in, some impressed, others skeptical. Cameron felt the ground shift beneath him again. The game had changed, and not by his choice. Lena touched his arm. "This could help you or destroy you." He didn't answer. He just watched the view counter climb. As he looked closer, he noticed something at the edge of the video frame. A reflection in the classroom window. A figure standing outside the door, holding a phone, watching, recording. And it wasn't anyone from their class. By midnight, the glow of 100 screens lit the campus like lanterns. The video of Cameron's exchange with Professor Rourke had spread far beyond their lecture hall. What began as a casual upload on the student network was now circulating through academic forums, study groups, and social feeds across the country. The title changed with every repost. "Freshman outsmarts his professor. The equation that broke the rules. When logic wins." Each version carried the same 30-second clip. Cameron's calm defense, Rourke's sharp correction, the stunned silence that followed. Out of context, it looked like rebellion. Online rebellion was currency. By 1 a.m., the video had crossed 2 million views. Cameron didn't sleep. He sat at his desk, the screen's blue light bleaching the color from his face. Notifications poured in. Mentions, direct messages, invitations for interviews. Some praised him as a prodigy. Others accused him of disrespecting authority. He scrolled through the comments until the words blurred. "This kid's the future of math." Rourke finally met his match. Probably staged. Lena texted him, "Don't read the comments. They'll rot your brain." He replied, "Too late." A minute later she called. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said automatically. "No, you're not. You sound like you've been staring at that screen for hours." He laughed softly. "Maybe because I have." "Then stop. You can't control the internet. You can only survive it." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Do you think Rourke's seen it?" "Everyone's seen it," Lena said. "It's on the university's trending page." He didn't answer. In his mind, he could already picture the professor's reaction. Calm, analytical, detached. Rourke would never admit surprise. He'd find a way to turn this chaos into another lesson. The next morning, campus felt different. Conversations quieted as Cameron walked by. People recognized him now, not as a face in the crowd, but as the student from the video. A few smiled, offering congratulations. Others just stared. When he reached the math building, two reporters waited outside the main doors, holding microphones and clipboards. "Cameron Ellis?" one asked. "Could we get a comment on what happened in class yesterday?" He blinked. "How did you even—" "Public video," the reporter said. "Everyone's talking about it." "I have nothing to say," Cameron replied, moving past them. Inside, the halls were quieter, but not gentler. Snatches of whispered conversation followed him. "That's him. He embarrassed Rourke. He's probably getting expelled." When he entered the lecture hall, the atmosphere shifted again. Students pretended to focus on their notes, but eyes flickered up. Rourke was already there, writing equations on the board as if nothing unusual had happened. "Good morning," the professor said when the class settled. "Let's begin." No mention of the video. No acknowledgement of the storm outside those walls. But the silence around the topic was deafening. Cameron sat rigid, waiting for some signal: criticism, reassurance, anything. None came. Rourke taught as though the room hadn't changed. His voice was measured, his focus absolute, yet something in his tone was different, colder, more deliberate. Every question he asked the class felt like a test of allegiance. Who would look at him? Who would look at Cameron? Halfway through the lecture, Rourke stopped mid-sentence. "Before we continue," he said lightly, "a note on ethics. In academia, context matters as much as content. A half-truth can travel faster than a theorem." The message was clear. He didn't look at Cameron, but everyone else did. After class, Lena caught up with him outside. "That wasn't subtle," she said. "He's furious," Cameron replied. "Maybe, but he can't say anything without admitting the clip's real." Cameron gave a weary smile. "He doesn't need to. He just has to wait for the internet to move on." "Will it?" "I don't know," he admitted. They walked across the courtyard. The autumn air smelled of rain and damp leaves. Above them, banners fluttered for the university's upcoming research conference, a yearly event where professors showcased breakthroughs, and students quietly hoped to be noticed. Cameron's thoughts kept drifting back to the anonymous messages. "You shouldn't have solved it. It wasn't meant to be solved at all." Now those words felt prophetic. The more attention the video gained, the less control he had over it. That night, the university released a short statement on its website. "We are aware of the viral video circulating online. The university values academic integrity and respectful discourse. We ask the public to refrain from speculation." It said nothing and everything at once. Within hours, the headlines multiplied again. "University silent amid viral math scandal. Student genius or classroom show-off." The narrative was no longer his to shape. By Friday, Cameron's inbox overflowed with invitations from journalists, podcast hosts, and influencers. A few offered money for exclusive interviews. He ignored them all. He tried to attend his classes, but each lecture felt like walking through glass. Professors either ignored him entirely or treated him with exaggerated politeness. One afternoon, his linear algebra instructor stopped him after class. "Ellis," she said quietly, "I've seen the footage. You handled yourself well." "Thank you," he said. She hesitated. "Be careful, though. Attention like that, people start expecting genius on demand." "I didn't ask for it." "No one ever does," she said. "But once they name you, they own the narrative." Her words echoed long after he left. That evening, he and Lena sat in the student cafe, both nursing coffees gone cold. "I've been thinking," she said. "What if the message you got, the one about not solving it, came from someone inside the department?" He looked up. "You think it's connected to the review?" "Maybe. The folder you showed me, it didn't look like a one-off thing. What if other students were silenced before?" He frowned. "You're saying the system has a pattern?" "Exactly. And you just exposed it accidentally." Cameron exhaled slowly. "Then whoever wrote those messages isn't warning me. They're warning the system." "Or both," Lena said. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of conversation around them blurring into static. Then Lena pulled out her phone. "You need to see this." On her screen was another video. An interview clip. Professor Rourke standing outside the faculty building, surrounded by reporter. "Mathematics is built on precision," he was saying. "Sometimes the media distorts what happens in a classroom. Mr. Ellis is a talented student, and I wish him the best. But breakthroughs require verification. Let's not confuse performance with discovery." Cameron felt the words land like weights. He's rewriting the story. Lena frowned. He's protecting himself. He watched the clip again. In every frame, Rourke looked calm, composed, the perfect image of authority. The subtle message was unmistakable. The student went too far. The comment section beneath the video was already divided. The professor's jealous. He's right. Students don't get to grandstand. This is why academia eats its own. Cameron closed the app. He wins either way, he said quietly. If I stay silent, I'm the arrogant kid. If I speak up, I'm the troublemaker. So what will you do? I don't know yet. Later that night, unable to sleep, he opened his email. Among the flood of notifications, one subject line stood out. You need to hear this. The sender was hidden, again anonymous. He clicked. An audio file downloaded automatically. Just 2 minutes long. He hesitated, then hit play. Static crackled, followed by muffled voices. 2 men speaking in a corridor. He recognized one instantly. Rourke. The footage won't vanish overnight, Rourke was saying, but it'll fade once the novelty wears off. Another voice. And the student? We'll redirect him. A quiet review, maybe a scholarship audit. Nothing formal. Cameron froze. The recording ended abruptly with a soft click. He replayed it twice, his mind racing. Who had sent it? How had they gotten it? The message below the audio read only one line. They won't let this go unpunished. Cameron sat in the dark, the faint hum of his laptop filling the silence. On his screen, the anonymous sender's email refreshed. New message, same address. This time it said, if you want the full recording, meet me tomorrow. Library, midnight. Excellent. Here's the neutral cinematic continuation of your story. The message replayed in Cameron's mind long after the screen went dark. If you want the full recording, meet me tomorrow. Library, midnight. The words felt both like a promise and a trap. He spent the following morning on autopilot. Classes blurred. Conversations sounded distant. Every time his phone vibrated, he half expected another message from the same anonymous address. None came. By afternoon, the video of him and Professor Rourke had hit 10 million views. News outlets now framed it as the student versus the system. The attention no longer felt flattering. It felt radioactive. At lunch, he sat across from Lena in the cafeteria, untouched food between them. She scrolled through her phone, frowning. It's spreading beyond the university now, she said. Someone uploaded a breakdown of your proof. They're calling it the Ellis theorem. He stared at her. That's not what I wanted. I know, she said softly. But once something's viral, it doesn't care what you want. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. Rourke's probably losing it. Or orchestrating it, she said. Don't forget that audio file. Cameron hesitated. You think it's real? I think someone wanted you to hear it, she replied. That means it's part of something bigger. He nodded, but said nothing more. Part of him wanted to believe it was all coincidence, a wave that would pass if he just stayed still. The other part knew better. Systems protect themselves. He'd written that in his notes once. Now he was living it. By evening, small things began to shift. When he swiped his student ID at the dorm entrance, the red light blinked instead of green. The lock refused to click. He tried again. Same result. The night manager glanced up from the desk. Ellis, right? Yeah. There's a hold on your housing access, the man said, reading the screen. Administrative flag. What kind of flag? Doesn't say. Could be billing. Could be compliance. My scholarship covers housing. Then talk to financial services in the morning, the man said, already looking back at his computer. I'll buzz you in for tonight. Cameron stepped inside, his unease deepening. When he checked his university portal, a new notification appeared. Subject scholarship reevaluation. Pending review. Please note this is standard procedure during ongoing academic inquiries. He reread the line 3 times. Ongoing inquiries. What inquiries? He clicked the link. It redirected to a blank form. The next morning he met Lena outside the math building. It's starting, he said, showing her the email. Her face hardened. They're freezing you out. I haven't done anything wrong. That's not the point, she said. You've become unpredictable. They'll call it protocol, but it's punishment. Inside, things grew stranger. 2 professors he'd spoken to regularly now avoided eye contact. Another, a younger lecturer, offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. When Cameron asked a question during class, Rourke didn't respond. He simply continued writing equations on the board. ignoring him completely. The silence was more pointed than any reprimand. By the end of the day, rumors had already surfaced. He overheard fragments in the hallway. Plagiarism review. Academic misconduct. The department's embarrassed. The words clung to him like static. In the library, Lena found him staring blankly at a blank page. "You can't disappear," she said. "I'm not disappearing." "Yes, you are. You're letting them write your story for you." He sighed. "Every move I make now looks defensive." "Then go on the offense." "How?" "Start with whoever sent that email," she said. Midnight's in 6 hours. At 11:45 p.m., the campus was hushed. The rain had returned, light and steady. The library glowed faintly in the distance. Cameron hesitated outside the entrance, scanning for anyone suspicious. Only the custodial staff moved inside, vacuuming quietly under fluorescent lights. He made his way to the top floor, where the old archives were stored. The smell of dust and paper hung thick. At exactly midnight, footsteps echoed. "Ellis?" a voice whispered. He turned. A figure stepped from between the stacks, hooded, cautious. Cameron tensed, ready to bolt. The person lowered their hood. It was the department assistant, the same man who'd stopped him from seeing the files in Rourke's office days earlier. "I don't have much time," the assistant said, glancing over his shoulder. "You didn't hear this from me. Then why help me?" Cameron asked. "Because truth deserves a witness." The assistant handed him a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Emails, directives, meeting notes." "About what?" "The review." "It didn't start because of the video. It started before." Cameron frowned. "Before?" The assistant nodded. "You submitted an independent project last semester, a small proof about self-correcting systems. The professor flagged it as potential breach of proprietary research." "Proprietary?" Cameron repeated. "It was my own idea." "That's what worried them," the assistant said. "Your idea overlaps with a grant proposal the department filed months earlier. They can't risk you claiming priority." Cameron stared at the flash drive, realization sinking in. "So they're making it look like misconduct to bury me. Not just you. The entire narrative," the assistant said. "If the funding committee finds out a freshman discovered their equation first, the grant collapses." Cameron's heart pounded. "And Rourke's involved." The assistant hesitated. "He leads the grant. He's also the one who requested your scholarship review." Cameron froze. "He what?" The man lowered his voice. "You didn't hear it from me," he repeated. "If they trace this, I'll lose my job." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the stacks. Cameron stood alone, the flash drive cold in his hand. Back in his dorm, he plugged it into his laptop. Dozens of files appeared, memos, scanned letters, internal communications. One subject line jumped out immediately. "Managing optics, student exposure risk." He clicked it. The message was short, dated 2 weeks before the viral video. "If the student's work mirrors our active research, we must intervene early. Scholarship oversight is a discrete mechanism for containment. The less public attention, the better." And Rourke. Cameron sat back, the room spinning slightly. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Lena arrived minutes later, breathless. "You got it?" He nodded, handing her the drive. "Proof. All of it." She scrolled through the files, eyes widening. "This is huge. We need to take it somewhere. Journalists, maybe." "Not yet," he said. "We have to verify everything first. And if it's real, then they've been manipulating research funding using student work," he said. "That's academic fraud." They sat in silence, the rain steady against the windows. After a moment, Lena said softly, "You're not safe here." He looked at her, startled. "Safe? You just exposed a system that protects millions in grants. You think they'll let that slide?" Cameron tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "They can't do anything drastic. It's a university, not a spy agency. Power doesn't need violence," she said. "It just needs silence." Her words lingered long after she left. The next morning, Cameron's university email refused to log in. The password reset link didn't work. His ID card still blinked red at every door. When he went to the bursar's office to ask about his scholarship, the clerk looked uncomfortable. "Your file's under administrative hold," she said. "You'll need to speak to the Office of Academic Integrity." "When?" "Next week," she said. "Earliest appointment available." He tried to argue, but her expression closed. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's out of my hands. By afternoon, Even Lena couldn't access him through the student network. His account had vanished. Every digital trace of him was being erased. He sat alone in the library that evening, the flash drive still in his pocket. The equation that had once felt like triumph now felt like a warning written in numbers. When a system detects a variable it can't control, it eliminates it. Outside, the storm built again, thunder rolling low and distant. He opened his laptop. The cursor blinked on an empty document. Slowly he began typing. The mathematics of retaliation begins with omission. He didn't know whether he was writing an essay, a confession, or evidence for his own defense. Maybe all three. A notification pinged. A new email. Anonymous sender. Same address as before. Subject line. You were right. He opened it. Inside was a single attachment. A screenshot of Rourke's office calendar. One entry was highlighted in red. Meeting Department Review Student Containment Strategy. Location Faculty Conference Room, 9 a.m. tomorrow. At the bottom of the email was one more line, typed hastily as if added seconds before sending. Bring the proof. But don't come alone. Morning arrived gray and brittle. The sky hung low over the campus, a pale sheet that promised more rain. Cameron had barely slept. The anonymous email still burned in his mind. Bring the proof. But don't come alone. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the flash drive lying on his desk. That tiny piece of metal now carried more weight than any textbook he had ever opened. Inside it lived a truth big enough to shatter reputations, and possibly his future along with them. At 8:15, his phone buzzed. A message from Lena. I'm outside. We're doing this together. He pocketed the drive and stepped into the hall. The dorm felt different now. Not a home, but a holding cell disguised as normalcy. As he walked toward the stairs, a few students nodded politely, but others looked away quickly, like proximity might be contagious. Outside, the cold air bit at his skin. Lena waited under a tree, hood pulled up, hands deep in her jacket pockets. You sure about this? She asked. No, he said. But I'm done waiting for permission to defend myself. They walked toward the faculty building, their footsteps muffled by wet leaves. Inside, the corridors were quieter than usual, as if the building itself knew what was coming. Every fluorescent light hummed softly overhead. Lena handed him a folded piece of paper. I printed the timestamp from that email, she said. If anyone questions the meeting's authenticity, it matches the university server logs. He smiled faintly. You think of everything. Habit, she said. I like rules, just not when they're used as weapons. They reached the conference room door at 8:59. Voices murmured inside. Cameron recognized one immediately. Rourke's calm and deliberate. The optics are stabilizing, Rourke was saying. But if this continues, we'll need an official narrative. The department cannot appear compromised by a student's behavior. Another voice. The dean, perhaps. We'll review his scholarship. Quietly, he'll withdraw voluntarily once pressure builds. Lena's eyes widened. You're hearing this? She whispered. Cameron nodded, pulse thudding in his ears. He pulled his phone from his pocket, hit the record button, and placed it against the door. Containment, Rourke continued inside, is about perception, not punishment. If we question his integrity, the media will move on. Attention dies when confidence fades. There was a pause. Then another voice spoke, a woman's stern. And if he fights back, Rourke replied, he won't. The moment a student's credibility becomes questionable, his voice loses value. The system corrects itself. Lena's hand found his. We have enough, she whispered. But Cameron didn't move. The calm in Rourke's voice struck something deep in him. Not anger this time, but recognition. It was the same calm he used when balancing an equation. Everything neatly aligned, variables controlled, outcomes predictable. That was Rourke's genius. Not in teaching, but in manipulation. He built systems that couldn't fail because he made sure they couldn't be questioned. And now Cameron had the one variable he hadn't accounted for: evidence. They stepped back quietly, retreating down the hallway before anyone emerged. Outside, the rain started again, soft at first, then heavier, soaking their jackets as they walked. Cameron's phone buzzed. Another email from the same anonymous address. You're reading this. They've already started drafting your suspension paperwork. The document is in the shared server. Folder name, Optics Review. He looked at Lena. There's more. They ducked into the library's side entrance and found a quiet corner near the computer terminals. The air smelled like dust and ozone. Cameron logged into his student account. It took 3 attempts. His access had been restricted, but not fully revoked. Inside the shared university drive, buried under departmental files, was a folder named Optics Review. He opened it. The screen filled with emails, memos, and drafts. Each one mapped a timeline of control, from Nenroar to Dean's office, PR department, subject strategy outline, neutralizing media embarrassment. We must emphasize the student's inexperience and the preliminary nature of his findings. Avoid direct confrontation. Frame the narrative as mentorship misunderstood. Another, recommend initiating an academic integrity audit. The purpose isn't disciplinary, but optical. Public perception of authority must remain intact. Lena covered her mouth. He's been planning this since day one. Cameron scrolled further, his hands trembling. One draft message was still unsent, dated just an hour ago. To Board of Trustees. If the student escalates publicly, we'll frame the incident as an overreach driven by immaturity. Our internal documents will show consistent oversight. End of discussion. He leaned back, the screen blurring. He's turned truth into paperwork. Lena looked at him carefully. What are you going to do? He thought for a moment. Use his own logic. Systems fail when a variable doesn't behave. She frowned. Meaning I'll stop being predictable. He copied the entire folder to his laptop. Then, instead of closing it, he began drafting an email. To Investigative Desk, The Chronicle. Subject: Internal Documents. University cover-up. Lena caught her breath. You're sending it to the press? Yes. Cameron, that's... I know. He interrupted gently. It's reckless. It could ruin me. But silence already is. She hesitated, then nodded. Then do it right. Explain everything. He attached the files, writing carefully. Every word deliberate. I am a student at Northbridge University. Attached are documents indicating faculty manipulation of research ownership and media narratives following a viral academic incident. These files show intentional misrepresentation to protect grant funding. Please verify before publishing. I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for truth. He signed it only with his initials. When he hit send, the progress bar crawled across the screen like the slow rise of a curtain. When it was done, a strange stillness filled the space around him. It wasn't relief exactly, more like balance restored. For the first time in weeks, he felt aligned with himself. That evening, Lena came by his dorm with takeout containers and 2 cups of coffee. You look like someone who's about to cause an earthquake, she said. He gave a tired smile. Or get buried under one. They sat by the window, watching rain streak the glass. Outside, the campus lights flickered through the fog. What if they find out you leaked it? She asked. They will, he said, but they'll have to prove it. You're too calm. He took a slow breath. That's the thing about math. When you understand the system, chaos stops being frightening. It becomes solvable. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Just promise me one thing. If this goes wrong, don't take the fall alone. He looked at her. I won't. Not this time. The next morning, campus felt unnaturally quiet again. Emails circulated about internal investigations and breaches of confidentiality. Professors whispered in hallways. Rourke's class was abruptly cancelled, replaced by a note on the board. Class postponed until further notice. Departmental matters in progress. Cameron walked past the sign, a faint sense of gravity pulling him forward. By noon, the Chronicle had published an article. University under scrutiny, after alleged internal cover-up. The story included excerpts from the leaked files, anonymized but unmistakable. Phrases like neutralize media embarrassment and control narrative exposure appeared in bold. The piece didn't name him directly, but it didn't have to. Everyone knew. By late afternoon, the story had reached national outlets. Students shared the link everywhere. Faculty inboxes overflowed. The university's PR office released a 2-sentence statement denying any systemic wrongdoing. Lena found him on the library steps, breathless. It's out. You did it. He nodded slowly, staring at his phone. Notifications exploded across the screen. Messages from unknown numbers, some supportive, some threatening. His world was tilting, but inside he felt something close to peace. Do you realize what happens next? She asked. Yes, he said quietly. The system will fight back. At that moment his phone buzzed again. A new email, no subject line. He opened it. There was only one sentence. You started a war you don't understand. Cameron's fingers hovered over the screen. As he stared at the message, Another email appeared instantly beneath it, from an unknown sender with a journalist's signature. Mr. Ellis, we received your files, but there's something you need to know. One of the documents you sent us wasn't written by Rourke. By morning, the campus was no longer quiet. Every screen, from the televisions in the dining hall to the phones in students' hands, blazed with the same breaking headline. Student leaks files exposing university data manipulation. Whistleblower or hacker. Northbridge's golden scholar. Under fire. Cameron Ellis's name was suddenly everywhere. He sat in the back of the crowded cafeteria, hood up, his breakfast untouched. The noise around him buzzed like static, half disbelief, half gossip. They're saying he hacked the servers. No, he leaked a report about fake research funding. My professor says the school's tied to some defense contracts. The words blurred together. Across the room, the large TV displayed a split-screen interview. On one side, a journalist read excerpts from Cameron's leaked documents. On the other, a university spokesperson delivered carefully chosen words. Mr. Ellis's allegations are being reviewed. We assure our community that Northbridge maintains the highest standards of academic integrity. Any claims of misconduct are taken seriously. Every phrase sounded rehearsed, pre-approved. Lena slid into the seat across from him, breathless, holding her laptop open. It's out. Everywhere. The Chronicle, the Post, even Reuters picked it up. You just went international. He gave a humorless smile. Congratulations, I'm trending. Don't joke about it, she said. This is huge. He leaned forward. And dangerous. The more visibility we get, the harder they'll push back. Lena's screen refreshed with a new wave of headlines. One stood out. Northbridge student challenges algorithmic admission system. She whispered. They're already reframing it. Of course, Cameron said. Control the language. Control the narrative. Outside, clusters of students gathered in the main courtyard. Some held signs reading Transparency Now and Education Mayo Exploitation. Others simply stood, watching, uncertain which side to believe. By noon, news vans began arriving. Satellite dishes unfolded. Reporters set up along the campus steps, rehearsing intros for their live segments. Cameron kept his distance, watching from the shadows of the library portico. This is surreal, Lena said beside him. They're turning it into a spectacle. He nodded slowly. That's how systems survive. They turn outrage into theater. At the top of the steps, a familiar figure appeared. Professor Rourke. He moved with the same precision he always had, adjusting his tie, nodding politely to the journalists. The crowd quieted. Cameras pivoted toward him like sunflowers following light. Lena stiffened. He's going to speak. Rourke stepped to the podium, expression calm, voice steady. Good afternoon, he began. As many of you know, recent reports have raised questions about the practices within our institution. I understand the concern, but let me be clear, this is not the result of systemic wrongdoing. It's the result of misunderstanding. A low murmur rippled through the students. Rourke continued. The individual responsible for these leaks, Mr. Ellis, is a gifted young man. However, in his pursuit of answers, he has misinterpreted confidential research as conspiracy. What he believes to be manipulation is, in fact, classified data related to private sector innovation partnerships. Lena's jaw clenched. He's discrediting you. Cameron's eyes stayed fixed on the professor. No, he's redirecting. Rourke went on. I personally mentored Mr. Ellis. I admire his intellect. But sometimes brilliance, when unchecked, leads to miscalculation. Let's not mistake curiosity for corruption. The crowd buzzed again. A journalist shouted. Professor, is it true that university data was being shared with corporate partners? Rourke smiled faintly. Collaboration is not corruption. Every major institution engages with industry. Innovation requires partnership. Then why was the data encrypted under external access protocols? That's classified information, Rourke said smoothly. And I'd remind everyone here that unauthorized disclosure of restricted data is a federal offense. Cameron felt the temperature drop around him. Rourke had just reframed the story. Not as a moral battle, but as a legal one, Lena whispered. He's flipping the narrative. You're the criminal now. Cameron's expression didn't change. That was always the plan. By afternoon, the protests swelled. Some students marched with handmade signs demanding Rourke's resignation. Others defended him, chanting that the leaks endangered research funding. The campus had split cleanly in two, one side shouting for truth, the other for order. Reporters swarmed anyone with an opinion. Microphones, cameras, flashbulbs. Lena kept close to Cameron as they tried to move through the crowd. "You need to say something," she said. "Right now they're telling your story for you." He stopped. "And if I speak, they'll twist that too. Every quote becomes evidence. Every silence becomes guilt." She stared at him. "Then what are you going to do?" He looked past her toward Rourke, who was still surrounded by cameras. Wait for him to slip. Hours later, as twilight fell, the main quad looked like a war zone of ideas. Posters scattered, debates echoing through megaphones. The tension was electric, alive. Cameron sat on the steps, exhaustion etched into his face. Lena joined him quietly. "They're calling it the North Bridge crisis now," she said. "Hashtags everywhere."
He gave a hollow laugh. "Crisis cells."
Then her phone buzzed. She frowned, scrolling through notifications. "Cameron, this just aired." She held the phone toward him. A news anchor's voice filled the air. "In an unexpected development, leaked documents suggest that the university's funding irregularities may be part of a larger government-backed predictive analytics project. Sources claim the whistleblower, Cameron Ellis, gained unauthorized access to restricted servers." Cameron went pale. "They're seeding the narrative. They want me charged." Lena swallowed hard. "We have to get ahead of this." He shook his head. "It's too late for defense. We have to prove offense." "What do you mean?" "Expose Rourke's next move before he makes it." As night fell, a press conference was announced for 9 p.m. The university live-streamed it across all official channels. Cameron and Lena slipped into the back of the auditorium, hidden among reporters. Rourke took the stage again, face illuminated by camera lights. His tone was solemn now, measured. "Before we begin, I want to express regret, not for the innovation we pursue, but for how it's been misunderstood." He looked directly into the cameras. "Transparency is the lifeblood of trust. So tonight I'm authorizing the release of selected documents to clarify the situation." Lena whispered. "Selected documents?" Cameron's stomach sank. He's going to fake transparency. The projector behind Rourke lit up, displaying charts and data pulled from the university archives. Everything looked legitimate. Numbers, funding allocations, academic partnerships. But Cameron saw it instantly. The pattern had been rewritten. "The second equation," he murmured. "He's replaced the corrupted datasets with new ones. It's a public overwrite." Rourke continued. "As you can see, every transaction aligns with institutional standards. No funds were misused. The so-called Astrovia link was part of a Department of Education grant initiative, fully compliant and audited." The crowd murmured approval. Lena clenched her fists. "He's burying the truth under official paperwork." Cameron stared at the glowing graphs. "No," he said softly. "He's leaving breadcrumbs. Even liars can't fake perfect math." He pulled out his phone, snapping a photo of the screen. "Look at the intervals," he said. "The timestamp rhythm. Every file he's showing follows the 0314 pattern, the same algorithmic sync we uncovered. He didn't delete it. He broadcasted it." Lena's eyes widened. "Why would he do that?" "Because he thinks no one will notice." When the conference ended, reporters swarmed the stage. Rourke smiled, answering calmly, dismissing speculation with charm and authority. Cameron stood in the shadows studying him. The calm poise, the deliberate control of language, the performance of humility. Then something changed. A journalist asked, "Professor, will the university press charges against Mr. Ellis?" Rourke paused. His expression softened, almost regretful. "We don't want to destroy a student's future," he said. "Mr. Ellis made mistakes, yes, but he's still one of ours. I'd prefer to see him rehabilitated, not punished." Lena exhaled. That almost sounded merciful. Cameron shook his head slowly. "No, it's strategy." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's shifting the tone, turning guilt into grace. That way, when he destroys me later, it looks like reluctance, not revenge." Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. The courtyard still buzzed with residual energy. Students watching the conference on their phones, debating in clusters. Cameron and Lena walked away from the lights, their reflections trailing across wet pavement. "You know this isn't over, right?" she said quietly. He nodded. "It's only Act 2. He glanced back toward the auditorium, where Rourke was shaking hands with reporters. Beneath the professor's calm smile, Cameron saw something, a glint of calculation, a promise unspoken. Later that night, As headlines proclaimed university professor clears his name, a new email appeared in Cameron's inbox. The sender's name made his blood run cold. Elias Rourke, Department of Predictive Systems. The subject line read, "You think you've solved the equation. You haven't even seen the variables." The rain had stopped by dawn, but the quiet that followed was heavier than any storm. Cameron sat at his desk surrounded by files, notes, and the faint hum of his laptop. The chalk-scrawled digits, 0314, still marked his wall, a ghostly signature left by whoever had broken into his room the night years. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. Every creak in the hallway made him turn. Every passing shadow felt like a warning. Across the desk, his laptop screen glowed with a new message from the journalist. "We verified your files. You were right about Astrovia. But you need to see what it's funding." Attached was a single image, a blurred photograph of a government lab door bearing two logos, Northbridge University and Astrovia Research Partners. Cameron zoomed in. The label beneath the logos read, Predictive Systems Division. Predictive. The word chilled him. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion blurring his thoughts. The data trails, the duplicated grant codes, the hidden equations, they weren't random. He'd been treating them as a crime scene, but maybe they were something else entirely. A design. He opened the latest batch of logs he'd copied before his drives disappeared. 100 spreadsheets of numbers stared back at him, meaningless to anyone else. But to Cameron, numbers spoke. And sometimes, they confessed. He scanned the metadata. The modification timestamps didn't align. One report had supposedly been updated a week before the grant was even approved. Another had funding amounts that didn't match the transaction summaries. At the bottom of one report he found a line of code embedded in the export settings. Z0. Sum of all time differences equals 0. A mathematical impossibility, unless someone had edited the timeline itself. "Someone rewrote the past," he whispered. By mid-morning, Lena arrived, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. "You look worse than I do," she said, setting down 2 coffees. "Thanks," he murmured, barely glancing up. She scanned the mess of open windows on his screen. "Please tell me you're not still combing through every file." "I found something," he said, voice low. "A pattern." Lena leaned closer. "Show me." He pointed to a sequence of grant records. Each document contained subtle inconsistencies. Decimals shifted, date formats altered, mathematical constants rewritten just slightly off. To the untrained eye, they were clerical errors. To Cameron, they were fingerprints. "Whoever's doing this is trying to create perfect balance," he said. "Every falsified record is offset by another fake that cancels it out. Financially, the system looks stable. No missing money, no surplus, just equilibrium." Lena frowned. "So it's an illusion." "Exactly. A second equation, the one behind the public one." He pulled up the main ledger and highlighted a string of transactions labeled Strategic Partnerships Initiative. This fund supposedly supports research innovation, but every transfer ends in the same identifier, 0314. It's everywhere. In the metadata, the routing codes, even the file hashes. It's the anchor point that holds the illusion together. Could that be Astrovia's ID? Cameron shook his head. No. It's too embedded. It's like an internal checksum. Something created to verify the false balance. He turned to her. "It's not just data manipulation. It's mathematical camouflage." Hours passed. The library emptied. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows, making them hum. Cameron's notebook was now filled with diagrams, equations twisted into flowcharts, financial paths turned into algorithms. At one point he stopped and stared at a line he'd written without realizing. "A system that hides imbalance sustains itself through denial." He underlined it, then added, "Denial has a half-life." Lena sat beside him, typing notes on her laptop. If this pattern is real, someone at the top knows. They'd have to. These aren't isolated reports. Cameron nodded. And if the money's cycling through Astrovia, it's more than fraud. It's infrastructure laundering. Meaning they're using the university's reputation to make private research look public. Funding flows in under the banner of education, gets reclassified as innovation, and disappears into off-site labs. Lena's brow furrowed. "Labs like the one in that photo?" "Exactly." They worked until sunset. The room grew colder, darker. Then something clicked. Cameron zoomed in on a quarterly ledger file titled Budget Consolidation Q3. Every document he'd examined so far had been timestamped using the system's default 24-hour format. This one wasn't. It used a 12-hour clock with AM/PM designation. He leaned closer. That's odd. What? Lena asked. The timestamp pattern's different. Whoever modified this file wasn't using the university's internal clock. So this edit didn't come from here. It came from a different time zone. He opened the file's properties, tracing the location tag. The latitude-longitude coordinates pointed to Washington, D.C. Government, he whispered. Lena's voice trembled. You think Astrovia's feeding data to them? I think Astrovia's them, he said. A proxy organization. He scrolled further, revealing the name of the system administrator who'd made the last edit. Elias M. Rourke, the professor's brother. Lena's eyes widened. That can't be coincidence. It's not, Cameron said. The Rourke family has deep ties to federal analytics programs. He mentioned once that his brother worked in predictive modeling. I thought he meant finance. Apparently not. Cameron rubbed his forehead. This isn't a cover-up anymore. It's architecture. Northbridge is the prototype. If it works here, they scale it everywhere. That night, he returned to his dorm. The lights flickered again as he unlocked the door. Inside, everything looked normal, but he could feel the absence, the weight of what had been taken before. He sat at his desk and opened his journal. The last entry he'd written read, "Truth requires structure." He crossed it out and wrote instead, "Structure requires truth." For hours, he stared at the data on his screen, overlaying graphs, building a mathematical model of corruption. The numbers aligned in ways that felt almost poetic, hidden symmetries, repeating cycles, calculated erasers. And then suddenly, he saw it. In the dataset, the same numerical sequences repeated every 3 months, 0314, followed by a 6-digit checksum, then a drop in expenditure records. The intervals were exact, down to the millisecond. It's a timer, he whispered. They're synchronizing the fraud. Every quarter, the system recalibrates itself to erase inconsistencies. He stood abruptly. It's automated. Lena, who had dozed off on the couch, stirred. What is? The cover-up, he said, pacing. It's not just people. It's code. They built a self-correcting algorithm, one that cleans its own tracks, every financial cycle. She blinked, trying to process. You mean it's alive? In a way, he said. It learns from past exposure and patches itself. Every time someone gets close, the data realigns. It's digital natural selection. Lena stood, her voice hushed. Then how do we stop it? He turned to her, eyes sharp. By breaking the equation. Find the value it can't predict. They spent the next hour searching for anomalies, anything that didn't fit the pattern. Finally, they found one. A single transaction, labeled Independent Research Grant, Student ID, Cameron's student ID. The algorithm had marked him as an error. Lena's breath caught. It's tracking you. He stared at the screen, heartbeat loud in his ears. It's been adjusting for me since the challenge. I disrupted the pattern, and the system tried to erase the anomaly. That's why they're coming after you. He nodded slowly. I'm not just in the data. I'm part of it now. He opened the model's root code, scrolling through the endless lines of syntax. One string repeated every few hundred lines. Constant. The same variable he'd used for his equation of bias. It was as if the system had absorbed his own work, adapted it. He whispered, "They stole my formula." Lena's voice broke the silence. Then take it back. He looked at her, realization dawning. If they used my math to balance their system, I can use my math to unbalance it. He began typing furiously, injecting a new function into the code, a recursive loop designed to expose the hidden dependencies. Once this runs, he said, it'll force the algorithm to show every false correlation. The truth will surface automatically. Can they trace it? Eventually, he said. But not before it's too late. He hit execute. The terminal blinked. Then lines of numbers began cascading down the screen, too fast to read. The system was unraveling itself. Every forged transaction, every falsified timestamp surfacing in real time. Lena stared in awe. You did it. But Cameron didn't answer. He was watching the code. The numbers were forming a pattern again, but not one he'd written. The data was responding, evolving. On the screen, a new line appeared at the bottom. Shaz, the exposure triggered. He froze. It knows. The lights flickered once more, and went out. In the darkness, his laptop screen glowed with one final message. before it shut itself down. 0314 protocol activated. External sync commencing. Cameron stared at it, heart hammering, realizing for the first time that the system he'd uncovered wasn't just protecting corruption, it was communicating with something far beyond the university. And whatever it was, it had just woken up. The lights snapped off. For a moment, Cameron's dorm was a void. The hum of his computer silenced, the rain outside swallowed by darkness. Only the faint blue glow of his laptop screen remained, flickering like the heartbeat of a dying star. He stared at the last line of code frozen on the display. 0314 protocol activated. External sync commencing. His mind raced. External sync? With what? Lena's voice cut through the dark. What just happened? He swallowed. It's talking to something. The algorithm? He nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. It's connected beyond the university network. It's reaching out. To who? I don't know yet. He began typing, hands shaking slightly, as he tried to override the system shutdown. Every command returned the same message. Access denied. The algorithm had locked him out. The door to his dorm creaked. They both froze. Cameron, came a voice, a whisper. Lena exhaled shakily. It's just me, she said, realizing belatedly that she'd been holding her breath. He forced a thin smile. If this were a movie, that would have been the part where the power comes back and something's behind us. Not funny, she muttered. He shrugged, though his heart was still hammering. When the emergency lights finally flickered on, the clock on his wall blinked 03, the same digits. By morning, campus felt unnervingly normal. The rain had stopped. Students laughed under umbrellas. The air smelled of wet pavement and oblivion. But for Cameron, nothing was normal anymore. He and Lena walked across the courtyard, both quiet. The events of the night before hung between them like static. I backed up the data before the power cut, she said finally. Everything we found, the algorithms, the financial loops, the lab connections, it's all safe. He nodded. Good. Because I think we just woke up something we weren't supposed to. You think it's alive? Not alive, he said. Adaptive. Like a nervous system built out of data. She frowned. That sounds impossible. So does rewriting history through timestamps, he replied. But they did that too. They reached the computer science building, where Cameron had arranged to meet a contact, a graduate student named Theo, who'd helped him before with server access. Theo was already waiting in the lobby, fidgeting with a flash drive. You didn't hear this from me, he said. But there's been a lockdown on the central database. Someone initiated a full encryption cycle at 3:14 this morning. Cameron's chest tightened. The same time the lights went out. Theo nodded. Yeah. And here's the weird part. The process didn't originate here. The university's servers were the target, not the source. It came from an external government node. Lena and Cameron exchanged looks. Theo lowered his voice. Whatever you're doing, stop. You're pulling at wires that don't end here. Cameron shook his head. If I stop now, this system keeps rewriting the future. Theo sighed, handed him the flash drive, and walked away. Then at least don't do it alone. Back in the lab, Cameron plugged in the drive. It contained system logs, fragments of network activity intercepted before the encryption sealed everything. He scrolled through them. IP addresses, access requests, query IDs. One line stood out. AST0314. Net. Node active. Status predictive selection mode. He zoomed in. That's the external node, he said. The one syncing overnight. Lena peered at the screen. Predictive selection? That sounds like admissions, he finished. They exchanged a look that carried the same unspoken thought. The system wasn't just hiding financial fraud anymore. It was deciding outcomes. Cameron pulled up a secondary log. Every student application passes through the university's central evaluation system. But this, he pointed to the node. This is running parallel computations, probably feeding results to Astrovia's servers. Meaning someone outside the university is determining who gets accepted, using criteria we've never seen. He clicked into the access data. The variables on the screen were clean, mathematical GPA, standardized scores, extracurricular metrics, but something about the weighting ratios felt wrong, too smooth, too predictive. It's not assessing merit, he murmured. It's predicting profitability. Lena leaned closer. Profitability? He nodded grimly. Students who are more likely to donate later, take on debt responsibly, graduate into high-income jobs. The algorithm's building an ideal revenue model. She struggled to find words. Monstrous. He stared at the code. It's efficient. That's worse. As evening fell, Cameron began piecing the fragments together. Astrovia's funding, the predictive model, the government link, the self-correcting equation. It was all part of one enormous system, a network that quantified human potential not by intellect or integrity, but by economic value. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion catching up to him. This isn't just corruption anymore, he said softly. It's engineering. Lena closed her laptop. Then you have to expose it. He nodded. The journalist's waiting for my next drop. This time it won't just be numbers, it'll be the story behind them. She hesitated. You're sure you want to do that now? After last night? He gave a tired smile. If the system's rewriting itself every quarter, then every delay gives it time to adapt. We leak it now, or it disappears forever. That night, Cameron sat alone in his dorm, the glow of his screen casting long shadows across the room. Every file he opened felt heavier, not just data, but consequence. He began drafting the report, an algorithm designed for fairness, repurposed for control, a university that sold its ethics for efficiency, a system that defines value not by who we are, but by what we're worth. His fingers trembled as he typed. This is bigger than me, he whispered. He attached the logs Theo had given him, the metadata showing the external connections, the code that proved Astrovia's influence. He titled the folder The Algorithm. As he prepared to upload, a soft noise broke the stillness, the metallic click of his door handle turning. He froze. The clock read 11:05. He turned slowly, every instinct on edge. Lena, he called. Silence. Another click, louder this time, deliberate. Then a faint voice from the other side of the door. Mr. Ellis, University Security. Please open the door. Cameron's heart pounded. Security? At midnight? He glanced at his screen. Upload it, he whispered to himself. Come on, come on. The voice outside grew firmer. Mr. Ellis, you're required to comply immediately. He unplugged his external drive, slid it into his jacket pocket. The upload hit. Last warning, the voice said. He hit send. The screen blinked. Transfer complete. The moment he turned toward the door, it burst open. Two figures stepped inside, one in a university jacket, the other in plain clothes. Cameron Ellis? The taller one asked. Yes, he said carefully. You're coming with us. For what? The man's expression didn't change. Unauthorized data distribution. Breach of institutional security. Behind them, the wind from the open door rustled the papers on his desk, scattering them like snow. His laptop chimed once more. An email confirmation from the journalist. Files received. Publishing now. Cameron met the man's gaze. You're too late. The agent sighed. That's what we were afraid of. As they led him down the hall, Cameron's phone buzzed one last time in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. A new message from an unknown number. You shouldn't have sent it. The algorithm isn't just watching. It's learning. He looked up at the corridor lights flickering overhead and realized, for the first time, that the system he'd exposed might already be rewriting him. By the time Cameron returned to his dorm that night, the campus had gone eerily quiet. The protests were over, the journalists gone. The lights in the courtyard flickered, half of them burned out. For the first time in days, he could hear his own footsteps. When he opened the door, the silence was wrong. Too complete. His desk was empty. Every notebook, every printout, every external drive gone. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the bare surface. The faint outline of dust where his laptop had been was the only proof it ever existed. Lena, he whispered, pulling out his phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. Even his router light was dark. Someone had wiped his space clean. He stumbled to his bed, yanked open the drawer where he'd hidden a flash drive. Gone. The wall where he'd scrawled formulas was freshly painted over. His journal lay on the floor, pages torn out. It wasn't a robbery. It was an erasure. He sat down hard on the bed, heart pounding, mind blank. His thoughts felt like static, memories dissolving into disbelief. Every trace of his months of research, every pattern, every discovery, gone in a single sweep. He opened his laptop bag, empty. He checked his phone again, just to make sure the screen flickered, then displayed an alert he'd never seen before. Account under administrative suspension. Access revoked. He stared at the message, numb, They hadn't just deleted his work, they'd deleted him. 2 hours later, Lena burst into his room, breathless. Cam. She stopped short, eyes darting over the stripped-down space. Oh my God, they cleaned you out. Everything, he said quietly. Even the backups. Gone. She ran a hand through her hair. I checked your cloud storage. Same thing. Error messages across all your accounts. They didn't just take files, he said. They took my identity, my access, my logins, my credentials. I don't even exist in the university system anymore. Lena stared at him, pale. They're making you disappear. Cameron's voice cracked. I don't understand how they could move this fast. She took a step closer. You exposed them. Remember? They control the servers, the infrastructure. They built the system. They know exactly where to pull the plug. He pressed his hands to his temples. It's like fighting an ocean with a match. No, she said softly. It's like fighting an ocean with a mirror. They hate reflection. Hours passed in tense silence. Cameron sat on the floor staring at the empty space where his work had been. Lena paced near the window. We'll find another way. The journalist still has copies. She must. He looked up slowly. If they haven't shut her down too. Before Lena could respond, his phone vibrated. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Mr. Ellis. The voice was calm, female, familiar. Julia? The journalist, she confirmed. I've been trying to reach you. They wiped your accounts, didn't they? Yes, he said. Everything. How did you? Because they tried to do it to me too, she interrupted. Firewalls, takedowns, deletion orders. They underestimated me. Cameron sat forward. You still have the files? All of them, Julia said. And not just backups. I made physical copies, hard drives off network. I knew they'd go for digital first. Lena's eyes widened. She's a genius, Julia continued, her tone sharper now. But listen to me, Cameron. They've launched a full internal investigation. You're the subject. They're accusing you of data theft, breach of confidentiality, and ethical misconduct. Cameron froze. They're framing me. Of course they are, Julia said. They can't erase the truth, so they're going to erase your credibility. When? The hearing's already scheduled, she said. End of the week. The board's calling it an academic integrity review. Lena whispered. That's fast. Too fast. Julia sighed. They want this contained before it spreads further. They'll make it look legitimate, but the verdict's already written. That night, Cameron barely slept. He kept replaying the last few weeks. The moment the equation appeared on the board. The challenge, the discovery, the exposure. Every step had felt like progress, like peeling away layers of truth. Now it all felt like a trap. By morning, the campus looked untouched by scandal. The lawns were trimmed, the fountains running, the air filled with the same casual chatter. The silence wasn't absence, it was orchestration. Lena walked beside him toward the administration building. You shouldn't go alone, she said. I have to, he said. If they see you with me, you'll be next. She stopped him just outside the steps. You're not alone, Cam. Even if they erase everything, they can't erase what you've seen. He gave a faint smile. That's what they're counting on, making me doubt that I ever saw it. He turned and walked inside. The hearing room was sterile. Glass walls, long wooden table, a university crest mounted on the back wall like a judge's seal. 3 administrators sat behind nameplates, flanked by an ethics officer and a legal advisor. Their expressions were neutral, their posture perfect. The dean began. Mr. Ellis, thank you for coming. We've convened this panel to address concerns regarding your recent activities related to confidential university materials. Cameron sat straight. You mean the corruption I exposed? The dean's expression didn't flicker. The materials you leaked included proprietary research and classified partnership data. That qualifies as misconduct. Misconduct. Cameron repeated. You mean evidence. I proved the system's been falsifying records. Another administrator leaned forward. Mr. Ellis, this isn't a debate. It's an inquiry. Our concern is not your interpretation of events, but your violation of institutional policy. So the truth doesn't matter? The ethics officer adjusted his glasses. Truth is subjective. Policy is not. Cameron stared at them, incredulous. You built a machine that decides futures based on profit margins. That's not policy. That's exploitation. The dean's tone hardened. Watch your language, Mr. Ellis. He took a slow breath, forcing control. You can delete files, but you can't delete patterns. The numbers don't lie. For the first time, one of the administrators shifted uncomfortably. The silence that followed was heavy. Taut. Then the dean said softly, "We'll take that under advisement. You'll receive notice of the board's decision shortly." The session was over. Outside, Cameron walked into the sunlight like a ghost. Lena was waiting at the bottom of the steps. "Well?" she asked. "They didn't listen," he said. "They never planned to." She clenched her fists. "They can't bury everything. Julia's got proof." He shook his head. "Proof means nothing if no one believes the person holding it." Lena stepped closer. "Then make them believe. You've come too far to give up now." Cameron looked past her, toward the rows of tall glass windows reflecting the campus. "They want me quiet," he said. "They'll get silence, for now. But silence doesn't mean surrender." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Cameron sat on the edge of his bed, the faint glow of his phone lighting his face. A new message appeared, from Julia. "The files are safe. I've mirrored them across multiple independent networks. They can't kill the story forever." He exhaled slowly, relief tinged with exhaustion. Then another message followed. "But the university just issued a statement. The Academic Review Board will deliver its verdict this Friday. Charges include unauthorized access and data theft." He read it twice. "They've already decided," he murmured. Lena, sitting beside him, said quietly, "So what are you going to do?" He turned toward her, eyes steady. "What they don't expect me to." She frowned. "Which is?" He gave a faint, tired smile. "Play by their rules, until the last second." The next morning, a new headline appeared online. "Northbridge University announces ethics hearing in data leak scandal. We remain committed to integrity and due process," says Dean Halbrook. But buried deep in the article was a single line that made Cameron's pulse quicken. "The hearing will be closed to the public, with no external witnesses permitted." Lena looked at him. "They're closing ranks." Cameron nodded. "Then we'll find another way in."
How?
He looked out the window at the sprawling campus below. "They forget who built their system. I know its weaknesses." That night, as campus lights blinked off one by one, Cameron sat before his laptop, the one Julia had helped him rebuild from recovered files. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wasn't hacking this time. He was archiving, preserving. Every line of code, every data point, every falsified record Julia had saved, all encrypted, renamed, and hidden in plain sight, within the university's own servers. When the board tried to erase him, they'd erase themselves instead. He leaned back, exhaustion settling in. "The silence of the system," he whispered. "That's their weapon, but maybe it can be their downfall too." Outside, the clock tower struck midnight. His inbox pinged with a new message. The sender line read, "University Legal Office." The subject, "Notice of formal hearing Friday, 9:00 a.m. Beneath it, a single line of text, "Verdict to be rendered same day." Cameron stared at the screen, jaw tightening. The system wasn't waiting for justice. It was scheduling his defeat. And somewhere deep in the university's network, a dormant process labeled 0314 sync flickered back to life. The crowd inside the auditorium had turned from orderly to chaotic in minutes. Students shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Administrators barked into phones. But above the noise, Cameron heard only one sentence repeating in his mind. "It's not from you." He slipped past the security guard and into the corridor, the heavy doors closing behind him. The air outside the hall was cold and metallic, humming with the echo of distant sirens. His phone vibrated again. Julia's name appeared on the screen. He answered immediately. "What happened?" Her voice came through fast, breathless. "There's been another leak. Not from my servers. Not from you. It's bigger, Cam. Hundreds of internal files, including private communications between trustees, donors, and federal contractors. It's all over the web." Cameron stopped in his tracks. "Who leaked it?" "No one knows. The metadata's scrambled, but whoever did it used your encryption key." He leaned against the wall, pulse racing. "That's impossible. Only you and—" "I know," she interrupted. "Which means someone has access to your system architecture. Meaning they cloned my signature." "Or," she said quietly, "someone on the inside helped them do it." By the time Cameron and Lena reached the journalism building 20 minutes later, the campus had descended into pandemonium. Students filled the courtyards, phones raised, watching live streams as news anchors dissected the unfolding scandal. Multiple faculty members implicated in financial misconduct at Northbridge University. Whistleblower's data leak exposes years of falsified funding reports. Sources confirm ongoing federal investigation. It was everywhere. Inside the building, Julia sat surrounded by monitors, her workspace lit by the harsh glow of breaking news banners. Lines of code streamed across her laptop as she tracked the source of the anonymous leak. She looked up as they entered. It's spreading too fast to contain. Major outlets have already mirrored the files. They're not even verifying them. They're just publishing. Cameron approached the desk, eyes fixed on the screen. What's in the new batch? Julia exhaled. Everything. Internal emails between deans and donors. Performance evaluations. Admissions data manipulation schemes. Even messages between the board and government liaisons. Discussing favorable narrative control. Lena let out a low whistle. It's over for them. Julia shook her head. No, it's over for everyone. Once you open Pandora's box, nobody walks away clean. By nightfall, every major network was running the story. The same anchors who once questioned Cameron's motives now called him a whistleblower, a disruptor, the student who exposed an empire of deceit. Footage of him speaking at the hearing played on repeat. His calm defiance turned into a symbol of integrity. He stood alone against a system built on lies. From accused to hero, the student who changed academia. Cameron watched the coverage from Julia's office, exhaustion and disbelief warring inside him. I didn't want this, he said quietly. Lena glanced over. You wanted the truth out. Not like this, he said. Not chaos. Julia was typing furiously, eyes darting across data trails. Truth and chaos are the same thing when control breaks. She turned her screen toward them. Look, the leak didn't just target the university. It hit Astrovia too. Their servers are hemorrhaging documents, financial statements, contract summaries, government memos. Cameron leaned closer. How much time before they trace it? Minutes, she said. Maybe less. The network's destabilizing. Someone's trying to clean the evidence midair. Can you stop it? She shook her head. No. But I can archive it before it disappears. Outside, the storm of information grew louder. By morning, news helicopters hovered above the campus. Reporters camped by the gates. Students marched with signs that read "Education for Truth" and "End the Algorithms." Every department released statements. Faculty divided into factions, those defending the institution's legacy and those demanding resignations. Professor Rourke had vanished. No one knew where he was. Dean Halbrook, according to the latest reports, had been placed on administrative leave pending a federal inquiry. The university's official social media pages went dark. The silence said everything. Cameron tried to focus, but the noise was relentless. Interviews, calls, messages from strangers offering book deals or interviews. Fame, overnight and unwanted. He sat in the library, a place once sacred to his thoughts, now invaded by whispers. That's him, someone murmured as they walked by. The student who took them down. Lena found him staring at his blank notebook. You're all over the news again, she said softly. He didn't look up. I thought truth would feel lighter than this. She sat beside him. You're not responsible for the way people use it. I opened the door, he said. Now everyone's rushing through it. For attention, not change. Lena's voice was quiet. Then close it behind you. Walk through it first. He looked at her. Something like gratitude flickering in his eyes. You sound like someone who believes in redemption. I believe in balance, she said. You taught me that. That afternoon, Julia called. Her voice was strained. Cam, you need to see this. He and Lena rushed back to her office. Julia was pale, her screen filled with red alerts. They're scrubbing everything, she said. Not just the files, the backups, the cloud mirrors, the public archives. Someone's deploying purge scripts across the network. Cameron's stomach twisted. Ow. They must have triggered Astrovia's emergency override. The system's designed to self-destruct when compromised. Lena frowned. So they're erasing their own evidence?
Julia nodded. And taking yours with it. Every trace of the leaks is vanishing.
Cameron stared at the disappearing data streams, lines of text blinking out like dying stars. How long before it's gone? An hour, maybe less. He exhaled shakily. Then we need to copy what's left. I'm trying, Julia said, but it's fighting back, encrypting as it deletes. Cameron sat beside her, scanning code. We can't outrun the algorithm, but we can confuse it. How? He began typing, building a mirror loop that redirected deletion commands into dummy directories. If I can stall it, the purge won't know what to erase. Julia's hands flew across the keyboard. You're insane. Maybe, he said, but I've been studying this system longer than anyone. The room filled with the rhythmic clatter of keys, the sound of defiance written in binary. Finally, the screen stabilized. Deletion paused at night. Julia slumped back. You bought us time. Not much, he said. But enough. The fallout was immediate. Within 24 hours, the university suspended operations. The board announced a temporary shutdown for comprehensive restructuring. Federal agents arrived to seize servers. News vans camped outside every entrance. Professors resigned. Donors withdrew. Students protested for transparency. And in the center of it all, Cameron Ellis, a student who had wanted nothing more than to solve an equation. That night the campus was quiet again, eerily so. Cameron walked across the quad alone, past empty benches and lamplight pooling on wet pavement. Every step felt heavier. He reached the steps of the math building, the same one where it all began, and sat down, looking at the darkened windows. For a long time he said nothing. Then, softly, what if the truth breaks more than it fixes? Behind him, Lena's voice came from the shadows. Then maybe breaking it was the point. He turned slightly, a faint smile touching his face. You think it's over? She hesitated. I think it's beginning to end. He looked up at the building again. Funny. The hardest equation I ever solved wasn't numbers. It was people. His phone buzzed. He frowned and pulled it from his pocket. An unknown number. Lena saw his expression. Who is it? He didn't answer. He just opened the message. It contained a single line of text. They're coming for you tonight. The phone vibrated again. Another message. Same sender. You shouldn't have tried to stop the purge. Cameron's breath caught. He looked toward the library, where Julia was still working, lights on behind the glass. Lena, he whispered, get Julia out of the building. What's going on? He showed her the screen. Her face drained of color. A third message appeared, this one with a file attached. A grainy still from a security camera showing his dorm hallway. A dark figure stood outside his door. Cameron's hands trembled as he stared at the image. Then the lights across campus flickered, once, twice, and went out completely. In the darkness his phone buzzed one last time. You shouldn't have tried to finish the equation. The power died so completely that even the night seemed to hold its breath. 1 second, the lamps along the quad glowed gold through the mist. The next, they vanished, leaving only the distant echo of alarms. Cameron froze on the steps of the math building, phone still glowing in his hand. The screen dimmed and went black. Lena, he whispered, don't move. Somewhere to their left, a generator coughed to life, humming once, then failed. The silence that followed was heavier than sound. Lena grabbed his arm. What's happening? He took a steadying breath. They killed the grid. Everything digital is blind. Cameras, sensors, servers. They're covering tracks or hunting in the dark. Julia, she's still in the library. They sprinted across the quad, the air cold and metallic. In the distance, emergency lights flickered from the research wing, pale red pulses like a heartbeat. When they reached the library doors, Cameron pushed them open. Inside, the emergency lights glowed faintly along the floor, illuminating rows of empty desks and the distant silhouette of Julia at her workstation. Julia, Lena called. Julia turned, relief washing over her face. Thank God, I was about to call. Her words caught as she saw their expressions. The lights, Cameron said. They're not just out. The system's dark. Someone's using the blackout to move. Move what? People, he said grimly. Or evidence. Julia closed her laptop, instinctively sliding it into her bag. We can't stay here. Cameron nodded. We leave campus. Now. But where? Lena asked. He thought quickly, mapping invisible networks in his head. If the system's blind, we need to think like it. Predictable behavior is traceable, so we do the opposite. No roads, no phones, no patterns. They hurried down the back stairwell, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the dark. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain and ozone. Where are we going? Julia asked. There's an old maintenance tunnel under the north wing, Cameron said. It connects to the engineering labs built before the new security infrastructure. Lena frowned. How do you even know that? He gave a faint, humorless smile. Because I mapped the entire campus network, including the parts they forgot. They reached the access hatch behind the physics building. Cameron knelt, prying the rusted panel open with a screwdriver from a nearby toolbox. The hatch groaned, then gave way.
Cold air rose from the tunnel below.
Go, he said, motioning for them. Julia hesitated. You first. He shook his head. If anyone's waiting, better they see me, before you. Reluctantly, she descended the ladder, then Lena, then Cameron followed, pulling the hatch shut behind them. The tunnel stretched in both directions, damp and low-ceilinged, lined with pipes that hissed faintly in the dark. Their footsteps echoed in uneven rhythm. Julia whispered, "What if they already know we're down here?" Cameron answered quietly, "Then we make sure the system can't predict where we'll exit."
How?
Math.
He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a small grid of numbers scrawled in his handwriting. Every surveillance algorithm uses probability paths, patterns of movement based on prior data. I've been studying them since the first leak. To stay unseen, we have to move irrationally. Literally, non-predictive. Lena blinked. You're going to calculate our escape? He nodded. Every decision as a variable. Distance, time, noise, exposure. Julia let out a shaky laugh. Only you would turn running for your life into a math problem.
Math is the only thing that doesn't lie, he said.
They navigated the tunnel in silence. Occasionally, the floor trembled with the faint vibration of machinery above. Cameron marked turns with chalk, mapping sequences in his head. At one junction he stopped. 3 exits, 2 monitored, 1 forgotten. How can you tell? Lena asked. Temperature differential. He pointed. That vent's cold, airflow from outside. The others are warm, interior recirculation. He led them down the cold passage. Minutes stretched into an hour. When they finally reached a rusted ladder, leading upward, Cameron climbed first and pushed open the grate. They emerged behind the old athletics complex, the air thick with humidity and the smell of wet earth. Julia looked around. Now what? We head east, Cameron said. Off campus. There's a safe spot, an abandoned observatory near the ridge. No network connection, no power grid. They started walking through the dark field, guided only by the faint glow of the city in the distance. Halfway across the open ground, Lena stopped. Cam, look. He followed her gaze. On the horizon, near the administrative buildings, lights were flaring, blue and white, sweeping across the grounds. Security, Julia whispered. No, Cameron said, voice tightening. That's not campus security. Their formation's too coordinated. Then who? Before she could finish, a low hum filled the air. Drones, hovering, scanning with infrared beams. Cameron grabbed their arms. Down. They dropped into the tall grass. Hearts pounding. The drones passed overhead, lights flickering through the mist. One hovered for a moment, directly above them, its sensors blinking red. Then moved on. When it was gone, Julia exhaled shakily. How did they find us this fast? They didn't, Cameron said. They found where the algorithm expected us to go, which means the real pattern's still in play. He looked east again. We keep moving. They reached the tree line as the first drops of rain began to fall. The forest beyond the ridge loomed like a wall, black and endless. Inside, the ground was slick, the path winding. The rain grew heavier, drumming against leaves. Lena slipped once, catching herself against a trunk. We're going in circles. Cameron shook his head. No. Spiral path, harder to track by distance. Julia managed a tired smile. You even calculate circles when you run. He didn't answer. His focus was absolute. Every movement measured, every sound analyzed. His brain was a living algorithm now, mapping probabilities in real time. After another hour, the trees began to thin. A small clearing appeared ahead, and beyond it, the outline of the old observatory, its dome rusted, its walls streaked with ivy. They approached cautiously. Inside, the air was musty but dry. Cameron found a lantern near the control table, lit it, and set it down. The soft amber glow filled the space. Julia sank onto a bench. We made it. Lena nodded, but her voice was uneasy. For how long? Cameron didn't answer. He was already at the console, connecting his backup drive. Julia frowned. You're working now? He nodded. If the system's erasing itself, this might be our only window to save what's left. I can use the observatory's isolated network to pull data fragments from the void, the deleted sectors that still linger. She rubbed her temples. You never stop. He looked at her. If I stop, everything we fought for disappears. Minutes turned to hours. Rain battered the dome above. The computer hummed softly as Cameron typed, recovering fragments of the algorithm piece by piece. Finally, lines of code began to appear on the screen, corrupted, but legible. Lena leaned closer. Is that it? He nodded slowly. The core equation, the one that ties every dataset together. Julia's eyes widened. You mean, he interrupted quietly. The system's blueprint, its heart. He saved the recovered file, encrypting it under a new name, Phoenix. As he did, a faint beeping sound echoed from his phone. A signal reconnecting. The power grid had returned. Signal's back, Lena said. Cameron frowned. That's not good. Why? Because if the system's online, it knows where we are. Before he could power the phone off, a message appeared on the screen. No number, no sender. Just 2 words. Hello, Cameron. Julia stepped closer. Who is that? He stared at the message, throat tightening. It's the system, or whoever's controlling it. Another line appeared. You solved the wrong equation. The lantern flickered. The computer screen went black. Cam? Lena said. He turned and froze. From the doorway came a soft sound. The crunch of gravel underfoot. A silhouette stood framed against the rain, motionless, watching them. Who's there? Cameron demanded. The figure stepped forward, face still hidden in shadow. Then a voice, low, calm, familiar, said his name. Cameron. He felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that voice. Lightning flashed, illuminating the stranger for a split second. Cameron's breath caught. It wasn't a stranger at all. It was someone he thought was gone forever. For a long, breathless second, no one moved. The silhouette in the doorway remained still as rainwater dripped from its coat, pooling on the observatory floor. Julia? Cameron whispered. She stepped forward into the dim lantern light. Her face was pale, eyes wide with urgency. You need to see this, she said, holding up a flash drive clenched in her fist. This is everything. Every deleted file, every audit trail. The system tried to bury it, but it couldn't erase what was already mirrored. Cameron exhaled sharply, relief and disbelief tangling in his chest. You're alive. I thought. Later she cut in. We don't have time. Lena helped her close the door against the wind. You shouldn't have come here. The whole grid's active again. Julia set her bag down and plugged the flash drive into Cameron's laptop. Exactly why I came. The connection's live. The moment I upload this, it's everywhere. Cameron stared at the screen. You're sure it's the full archive? Every byte, Julia said. Financial data, manipulated algorithms, administrative orders, all tied together in one narrative. He sat down slowly, scanning the recovered directories. His own earlier files appeared among them, interwoven with new discoveries, emails between trustees, encrypted memos from Astrovia executives, even internal board communications. It was all there, proof, the real kind. They worked side by side through the night. Rain hammered the dome overhead, the sound mixing with the hum of the laptop fan. The air smelled of ozone and dust. Cameron organized the files into a timeline, falsified admissions algorithms, redirected funds, the 0314 synchronization cycles. Each piece clicked into place, like a gear in a clock finally finding rhythm. Lena cross-checked data against Julia's archives. It's perfect symmetry, she said quietly. Every falsified report lines up with a donation cycle. They used prediction models to guarantee outcomes and profits. Julia's hands trembled as she typed. It wasn't education. It was economics disguised as opportunity. Cameron looked up at them both. We release it together. Not anonymously. Not this time. If we hide behind shadows, they'll rewrite the story again. Lena's voice was soft but steady. Then we tell it in daylight. By dawn the file was ready. A single encrypted packet titled The Proof. Julia opened a secure transmission window. Once I send this, it goes to everyone. Media, oversight committees, universities. There's no undo button. Cameron hesitated, staring at the blinking cursor. The choice in front of him felt heavier than any equation he'd ever solved. He remembered the beginning. The silent lecture hall, the unsolvable problem, the smirk of disbelief. All of it had led here. He nodded once. Send it. Julia hit enter. The packet uploaded, progress bar crawling slowly from 0 to 100. Each percent felt like a heartbeat. When it reached the end, the screen flashed once. Transmission complete. The world was about to change. By noon it had. Major networks interrupted broadcasts to cover the story. Whistleblower exposes predictive admissions scandal. Private contractors manipulated university funding models. Mathematics of inequality, how data shaped opportunity. Screens everywhere glowed with Cameron's face, not as an accused student, but as the person who proved what no one wanted to see. Outside, reporters crowded the gates of Northbridge. Helicopters hovered above. Protesters filled the streets. In the chaos, Cameron stayed inside the observatory, silent. The noise was too big to feel real. Lena sat beside him, scrolling through article after article. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "We did. But it's not victory, it's exposure." Julia looked up from her screen. Exposure is where every reform starts. The impact rippled outward within days. Government committees announced investigations. University boards across the country began emergency audits of their data systems. Funding programs were frozen pending review. A week later, a live press conference aired from Washington. A senior education official stood at a podium, holding a printout of Cameron's findings. "This report has revealed vulnerabilities that challenge the integrity of higher education nationwide. We are forming an independent commission to reevaluate data ethics in academic institutions." Cameron watched it unfold from the observatory, eyes hollow with exhaustion but burning with quiet pride. Lena touched his shoulder. "They're listening." He exhaled. "For now, systems adapt. So must we." 3 weeks passed. The media storm began to settle into analysis and policy. Cameron's name became shorthand for the fight for transparency, cited in op-eds, documentaries, student speeches. Invitations poured in from universities and conferences. Reporters camped outside his dorm, professors sent congratulations, and strangers wrote letters calling him brave. But he rarely left the observatory. The noise felt distant, almost alien. Julia visited one afternoon, with coffee. "You could be anywhere now," she said. "You could work for the commission, lead reform." Cameron smiled faintly. "And become part of another system?" "No. I'm better on the outside." She tilted her head. "You sound like someone planning to disappear." He looked at the dusty telescope near the window. Not disappear, just recalibrate. That evening, he walked through campus one last time. The math building loomed ahead, repaired, repainted, reborn. Through the windows he saw students inside, scribbling on boards, laughing, arguing, learning. He paused outside the same lecture hall, where it had all started. The door was open. Inside, a new professor stood before a class of fresh faces. On the board was a single equation. Elegant, complex, daring. Solve for truth. Cameron lingered in the doorway. The professor noticed him and smiled. "You look like you've seen this one before." He chuckled softly. "Something like that." As he turned to leave, a voice from the front row stopped him.
Excuse me, sir.
He looked back. A young student, barely 19, was sitting near the middle row. Nervous, uncertain, but with a spark of curiosity in his eyes. He raised his hand. "Can I try it?" Cameron smiled. Not the tired, wary smile of the past months, but something deeper. "You already have," he said. The class laughed lightly, unaware of the weight behind his words. He watched the student stand and approach the board, chalk trembling slightly in his hand. It was all there again. The silence, the anticipation, the moment before proof. Outside, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, washing the campus in gold. Julia and Lena waited by the steps. "Ready?" Lena asked. Cameron looked back at the building one last time. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Ready." As they walked toward the gate, news alerts buzzed on nearby phones. Federal legislation proposed Academic Transparency Act. Nationwide review of data algorithms underway. For the first time, the numbers had changed. Not against people, but for them. Months later, a small memorial plaque appeared in the math building hallway. It read, "For those who asked questions no one wanted answered. In honor of Cameron Ellis and the pursuit of truth." Students passed it every day, some barely noticing, others stopping to touch the engraved surface as if it might whisper courage. Back at the observatory, Cameron kept one final record, a private log on an isolated drive. It contained the last unsolved fragment of the original algorithm, the part that no one else had understood. He'd named it Equation Zero, not a flaw, a reminder. Because for every truth uncovered, another still hid behind code. He closed the file, shut down the terminal, and looked out at the night sky. The system adapts, he murmured, but so does truth. Lena stepped beside him, gazing at the stars. Do you think they'll ever stop building systems that fail people? He smiled faintly. Not until they learn to solve without bias, without fear. A new semester, a bright classroom. A professor writes a challenge on the board, a question of fairness disguised as an equation. Silence fills the room until a single student, calm and unafraid, raises a hand. This time, the entire room turns to listen. The proof had changed everything, but the real question remained. How many equations in the world are still written to favor those who wrote them? Some truths don't echo until someone dares to speak them. If you've ever felt silenced, overlooked, or underestimated, remember, courage starts with one voice. Share this story so it's not forgotten, and type yes if you still believe truth can win. The auditorium looked nothing like a classroom anymore. The long wooden tables were pushed aside to make space for a panel of administrators, seated under harsh fluorescent lights. A university crest loomed behind them, like a seal of judgment. Rows of students, faculty, and reporters filled every seat. The air buzzed with anticipation, the quiet kind that always precedes spectacle. Cameron sat alone at a small desk in front of the panel, a single microphone in front of him. His tie was slightly crooked, his hands folded tightly together. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, but it didn't matter anymore. He wasn't here to perform. He was here to prove. At the center of the panel sat Dean Halbrook, posture immaculate, expression unreadable. To her right, the university's legal advisor scrolled through files on a tablet. To her left, Professor Nathaniel Rourke, silent, poised and watching. Cameron's stomach tightened at the sight of him. Halbrook tapped her pen against the table. This hearing will determine the outcome of our review into allegations of unauthorized access and data distribution by Mr. Cameron Ellis. She began. Mr. Ellis, you have the floor. Cameron rose slowly. Thank you. His voice echoed through the room, steady but low. Before we begin, I want to clarify something. This isn't about me. It's about what I found, and what this institution tried to hide. A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Halbrook frowned. Stick to the facts, Mr. Ellis. He nodded. That's all I've ever done. He reached into his folder and pulled out a single flash drive. Julia's backup, the last untouched copy of the data. He placed it on the table and pushed it forward. This contains internal files that show how university research funds were redirected through a private contractor named Astrivia Research Partners. It also contains algorithmic models that determine admission decisions based not on merit but on long-term profitability. Rourke shifted slightly, the first movement he'd made since the hearing began. Cameron continued, I've compiled transaction records, system logs, and metadata proving that several documents were altered after publication to conceal these patterns. Each falsification corresponds directly with grant renewals and funding reports. He looked up, eyes locking with the dean's. A system isn't broken, it's designed this way. The legal advisor cleared his throat. Mr. Ellis, are you aware that possession of confidential research constitutes a breach of University Code Section 4? Cameron nodded. I'm aware, but what I'm presenting isn't theft, it's truth. Halbrook leaned forward. You're alleging institutional misconduct without definitive proof that these files are authentic. Then let's authenticate them, he said calmly. He turned toward the screen behind him, where Julia's encrypted drive was already mirrored through the projector. Lines of code filled the screen, not equations this time, but patterns, timestamps, financial routes. Cameron stepped aside. Each file contains embedded digital signatures. Every signature traces back to the university's own administrative network. If this data were forged, the hash keys wouldn't match. He highlighted a section of code. But they do. The audience leaned forward, as the panel's data technician cross-checked the values. After a moment, she nodded slowly. The hashes match, she said quietly. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Halbrook's voice was still cool, but thinner now. Matching keys don't prove intent. No, Cameron said, but intent is written between the numbers. He pulled up a spreadsheet of quarterly budgets. Each line was pristine, symmetrical, flawless, too flawless.
Mathematics is a language, he said, pacing slowly. And like any language, it leaves traces of tone. Look closely, identical intervals, repeating time codes. Each dataset is too perfect because someone wanted it to be. He paused. Real data has noise, error margins, fluctuation. These files have none. They were sanitized.
A few students in the audience whispered, impressed. Rourke finally spoke, voice smooth as silk. Mr. Ellis, you seem to be interpreting mathematical precision as corruption. Isn't it possible that your analysis is simply flawed? Cameron turned to face him fully. It would be, if you hadn't left your fingerprints all over it. The room went silent. He clicked to the next slide. This is the document you released publicly during your press conference. Notice the embedded watermark. NR Auth. That's your approval tag. Now look at this earlier version. The same document, time-stamped a week before publication, with identical structure and your digital ID in the metadata. He looked directly at Rourke. You didn't verify the data. You rewrote it. Rourke's jaw tightened. You're making assumptions. Cameron didn't flinch. Then explain the 0314 protocol. A collective murmur swept through the audience, the first real fracture in the room's composure. Halbrook looked irritated. Mr. Ellis, that code is irrelevant to this hearing. It's entirely relevant, he said, voice steady. Because 0314 is the synchronization system that hides every altered record. It runs quarterly, resetting inconsistencies across all financial databases. I traced its origin, not to the research department, not to IT, but to the Office of Sponsored Programs, which means administrative authorization. He looked straight at the dean. Authorization that comes from your office. Gasps echoed through the room. Halbrook's face went pale, but she composed herself quickly. You're implying something you can't prove. Cameron leaned forward. No. I'm demonstrating something you can't deny. Lena, sitting among the audience, clenched her hands together. Every minute felt like a wire tightening between 2 points. Truth and consequence. Cameron took a breath and shifted his tone. When I first raised my hand in that classroom months ago, all I wanted was to solve an equation. I didn't realize the equation wasn't on the board. It was this institution. Every variable hidden. Every constant disguised. I've spent months proving that corruption here isn't a glitch. It's policy. The room was utterly still. Even the hum of the projector seemed to fade. He closed his laptop and looked at the panel. You can call me a thief, a hacker, a fool, but the numbers don't lie. You can silence a voice. You can't silence math. Halbrook exhaled slowly, regaining control. Mr. Ellis, she said, you've presented your case. The board will review your statements privately before issuing a final decision. Cameron stayed standing. You mean you've already written it? The dean hesitated, just long enough to confirm it. A few students in the crowd began to applaud quietly, but security motioned for silence. Halbrook gestured toward the guards. Escort Mr. Ellis from the hall while we deliberate. As they approached, Rourke suddenly stood. Wait. Halbrook frowned. Professor, I need to say something, Rourke interrupted. His voice shook slightly for the first time. He stepped around the panel table, walking toward Cameron. The entire auditorium held its breath. Rourke's expression was unreadable, somewhere between guilt and defiance. For weeks, he began. I've been accused of deceit, of manipulation. Perhaps I deserve some of that. But before you decide my fate or his, you should see this. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. Halbrook stiffened. Professor, what are you doing? He ignored her and unfolded the paper. This is a resignation letter. The room erupted, whispers, gasps, a click of camera shutters. Halbrook stood abruptly. Yours? Rourke's lips curved into something like a smirk. No, he said quietly. Yours. The room went silent again. Cameron's breath caught as Rourke placed the letter on the table. The university crest glimmered faintly in the light. Rourke continued, voice steadier now. You authorized the 0314 synchronization protocol, Dean Halbrook. You approved every transfer to Astrovia. You used my credentials to make it trace back to me. I played my part, but you wrote the script. Halbrook's face blanched. You're lying. He met her eyes. For once, he said. I'm not. The audience exploded into shouts, the sound of chairs scraping, reporters rushing forward. Lena covered her mouth. He just flipped the story, she whispered. Cameron stood frozen, caught between vindication and disbelief. Halbrook slammed her hand on the table. Enough. Security officers stepped forward, trying to contain the chaos. Rourke looked at Cameron once more, an unreadable expression passing between them, half regret, half relief. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his voice barely audible over the noise. Every system collapses eventually, he said. Even this one. Cameron stood amidst the uproar. The dean shouting orders, Reporters shouting questions, the crowd on its feet. The resignation letter still lay on the table, a single line visible beneath the university seal.
Effective immediately upon confirmation of investigation findings.
But before Cameron could move, one of the guards leaned close and whispered, "Sir, you might want to step outside." "Why?" Cameron asked. The guard's expression was grim. "Because the media just got another file drop, and this time it's not from you."